Close your eyes and listen. What if, in the soft hush of night, you could hear the fading heartbeat of empires long forgotten? Beneath the emerald canopy of ancient forests, bathed in moonlight across wind-bleached dunes, and hidden in the silent depths of the sea, lie relics of civilizations that once dreamed in stone and starlight, only to vanish without a trace. No grand monuments remain to tell their tales, no voices left to whisper their secrets, just the echo of their wonders fading into dust. Tonight, we drift into those lost worlds, tracing ghostly ruins from the sun-baked plains of the Indus to the submerged temples off Japan's coast, from the silent mounds of North America to the carved faces watching over Easter Island. So, lie back, breathe deeply, and let the stories of vanished greatness carry you gently into the unknown. In the pale light of morning mist, imagine a city waking to the soft murmur of flowing water, its brick-lined streets still warm beneath the rising sun. Here, in the heart of what we now call the Indus Valley, lay Harappa and Mohenjodaro, urban marvels that rivaled the greatest ancient capitals, yet whose names are all we have left of their people. As our footsteps echo through deserted avenues, the distant drip of a covered drain reminds us that these were not mere settlements, but thriving centers of human ingenuity and ritual life. At their peak between 2600 and 1900 BCE, the cities of the Indus Valley supported more than 5 million souls across a region larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Imagine craftsmen laying uniform-fired brick blocks in perfect grids, merchants weighing silver and carnelian beads on standardized scales, and families taking daily baths in monumental great baths, public water tanks as meticulously engineered as they are mysterious in purpose. Yet for all their precision, the people chose to leave no royal tombs, no soaring temples, no towering statues to immortalize their rulers. Instead, they wove their story in whispers on thousands of seals etched with symbols that still resist our every attempt to read them. What drew these architects of sanitation and town planning to such elegant restraint? Some scholars believe their society was organized less by power than by principle, perhaps an egalitarian network of city-states, each functioning independently, yet united by shared standards of brick size, weights, and measures. Others suggest a decentralized confederation, where no single monarch could command armies, yet no one went hungry or thirsty. In the corridors of Mohenjo-daro's Great Bath, one can almost hear the laughter of children splashing in clear water, the low hum of conversation as neighbors exchange news of distant markets, only to be swallowed by an all-enveloping silence. By around 1900 BCE, however, that silence grew louder. The once fertile plains began to dry as shifting monsoons and the vanishing Sarasvati River parched the fields. Tectonic upheavals rerouted waterways. Soil salinization crept into fields once green with wheat and barley. Without irrigation, granaries emptied, and the hum of civilization faded into the wind-swept ruins. Entire neighborhoods were abandoned, their brick foundations left to the unrelenting sun and drifting sand. Yet, even in decline, there was no sign of conquest, no burnt gates, no blood-stained streets, only a gradual, collective exhale into oblivion. Still, the Indus did not surrender all its secrets. Here and there, seals bearing enigmatic glyphs lie scattered among pottery shards, defying every Rosetta Stone. Was their script a symbolic shorthand rather than a full language? Did it vanish with its speakers, deliberately hidden from invaders, or lost in the dispersal of people migrating eastward, quietly seeding the roots of later Indian cultures? Fringe theories whisper of cometary impacts or sudden epidemics, fleeting catastrophes too swift to leave visible traces. Others dare to imagine they carried forgotten technologies, water-powered mills or early mechanical pumps that perished with their inventors. Even the dead add to the mystery. In parts of Mohenjodaro, archaeologists have uncovered skeletons sprawled in the streets, arms outstretched as if in surprise or despair. For a moment it seemed evidence of disaster, striking without warning. Yet deeper analysis suggests these bones may have drifted in later layers, their positions less meaningful than once believed. Still, the image lingers. City dwellers taken unawares by some invisible force, their final moments frozen in time. Today, as we refine our tools, computational linguistics, AI-driven pattern analysis, satellite surveys mapping buried settlements, the Indus Valley yields new clues each season. Pottery inscribed with undeciphered lines, clay figurines hinting at mother goddess worship, even traces of cotton textiles whisper of a culture both sophisticated and subtle. Yet with every answer comes another question. Why did a civilization so advanced choose to erase its own voice? What dreams died with its last inhabitants, and what echoes of their beliefs still slumber beneath the earth? And so we stand on the edge of their world, listening to the faint heartbeat of a society that built grid-perfect cities and vanished into legend. If such a marvel of human coordination and creativity could slip so completely from memory, what hope do we have of safeguarding our own? As the dust settles over Harappa and Mohenjodaro, our journey continues westward across an ocean, and centuries later, to the earth-mounded marvels of the Mississippian culture at Cahokia. In the soft glow of dawn, the mist rising from the river bottomlands feels almost like a whisper, an echo of countless footsteps that once trod these plains. After leaving behind the brick-lined avenues of Harappa and Mohenjodaro, we now cross an ocean and several centuries to stand amidst a very different marvel, the earth-mounded city of Cahokia. Here, just east of modern St. Louis, the flat horizon swells into monumental geometric forms. Hundreds of earthen hills that once framed a thriving urban center, far grander than anything early European settlers could imagine. At its height, around 1100 CE, Cahokia may have been home to as many as 20,000, 40,000 people, a population rivaling that of medieval London, spread across 6 square miles of plazas, neighborhoods, and temples, all laid out with purposeful symmetry. The largest of these, today known as Monk's Mound, rises nearly 100 feet above the floodplain, its broad terraces laid with packed earth so meticulously leveled that you can still sense the hands that shaped each layer, basket by basket. From its summit, the smoke of ritual fires may once have curled into the sky, visible for miles around, a beacon calling pilgrims, traders, and supplicants alike. Imagine walking straight-line causeways radiating from a central plaza, the warm earth soft beneath your sandals. Wooden palisades once ringed parts of the city, painted with bright pigments now lost to time. Massive retaining walls held back the river's seasonal floods, while carefully engineered ridges and canals turned those same waters into life-giving swales, irrigating maize, squash and beans that fed the bustling population. In the hush before sunrise, you might have heard the rhythmic pounding of hammers as craftsmen fashioned copper from the Great Lakes, or the low hum of barter as merchants weighed Gulf Coast shells against obsidian from the Rocky Mountain. Yet for all its scale and sophistication, Cahokia was an organic city, built of earth, wood, and thatch rather than stone. No great cathedrals crowned its skyline, no marble tombs memorialized its rulers. Instead, its legacy lies buried in soil layers and scattered artifacts, millions of oyster shells marking feasting grounds, pottery shards inscribed with symbolic motifs, and the remains of Mohenjodaro, a circular ring of timber posts aligned precisely to the solstices, where the first light of summer would have pierced the center like a celestial key unlocking the seasons. Beneath the grandeur, however, lay stark social contrasts. At Monk's Mound's base, archaeological excavations have revealed lavish burials, elite individuals interred atop beds of shell beads, flanked by sacrificial victims whose outstretched arms and carefully arranged bodies speak of ritual devotion and perhaps coercion. What power demanded such ultimate sacrifice? What ideology could unite tens of thousands under the banner of an earthen monument so immense that it reshaped the landscape itself? By the mid-13th century, Cahokia's bustle began to fade. Tree-ring data reveals decades of drought that would have strained agriculture. Deforestation for construction and fuel may have accelerated soil erosion, compromising the very fields that sustained the city. Famine and political unrest could have followed, unraveling the delicate balance of elite privilege and communal cooperation. But there are no layers of ash to signal a fiery siege, no mass graves to tell of wholesale slaughter, only a gradual exodus, homes abandoned with doors left open, tools left in hearths, and plazas left to sprout grasses once trod by so many. Still, the voices of Cahokia's people linger in the silence. The curve of a mound against the skyline, the whisper of grass through sun-baked earth, the hollow echo beneath a collapsed lodge. Descendant communities, the modern Mississippian tribes, carry faint threads of memory in their oral traditions, stories of mounds rising like hills of golden earth, of sacred groves where ancestors danced beneath the moon. Those memories, however fragmented, hint at a continuity of spirit far beyond the city's physical demise. And then there are the whispers at the edge of scholarship. A few researchers see in Cahokia's rise and fall a cautionary tale of environmental overreach, a society that in mastering its riverine world sowed the seeds of its own undoing. Others propose more enigmatic causes, epidemics that left no trace in the soil, factional schisms too swift to preserve records, or perhaps even astronomical events that upended cosmological faith. Still more speculative voices draw parallels between Cahokia's mounds and megalithic sites across oceans, suggesting ancient transcontinental contacts that mainstream archaeology resists as unlikely. Yet none of these theories can fully capture the wonder of a city carved from living earth, a civilization that flourished without iron tools or written chronicles, leaving behind only the silent testimony of its sculpted hills. Walking among those mounds today, you feel both the weight of absence and the pulse of human ambition, a reminder that greatness can be built from humble materials, and that even the mightiest constructions must eventually yield to time. As the morning sun climbs higher, casting long shadows from mound to mound, you sense that Cahokia's greatest monument may not be its largest earthwork, but the questions it leaves unanswered. What did the builders of Monk's Mound see when they gazed across their domain? What songs did they sing in the cool hours before dawn? And, most poignantly, how do we honor their ingenuity even as their voices slip away? And so, leaving behind the silent giants of Cahokia, our journey turns southward into the emerald forests of Mesoamerica, where another civilization awaits, one that carved not earth, but colossal stone heads into the live rock of Veracruz. Next, we descend into the world of the Olmecs. In the hush before dawn, imagine stepping into a world swallowed by emerald shadows, a world where colossal stone gazes pierce the gloom, silent as the ghosts they embody. Deep in the verdant lowlands of Veracruz and Tabasco, centuries before the Maya or the Aztecs, a civilization of uncanny artistry and mystery flourished, the Olmecs. Their legacy is not written in scrolls or sung in epics, but carved in granite and basalt. Faces larger than life, watching over the jungle like ancient guardians of a lost realm. At the heart of Olmec power lay San Lorenzo and La Venta, sprawling ceremonial centers where massive boulders, some weighing over 20 tons, were hauled from distant quarries by hand, dragged across swamp and vine-choked paths in feats of human determination. Picture hundreds of laborers, their hands raw and backs bent, hauling megaliths through sluggish waters, the rhythmic splash of oar against paddle echoing in the humid air. Why did they labor so? What vision drove them to transport stones the size of modern apartment cars, carving each feature, broad noses, full lips, almond eyes, with such precision that millennia later those eyes still seem to search for something beyond our reach? Their colossal heads are the most enduring testimony, 32 in all, each unique, each crowned with what might be helmets or ceremonial headdresses. No two are alike, suggesting individual portraits of rulers or deities, yet no inscription survives to confirm a single name. Beneath those helmets lie secrets, glyphs on scattered steely hint at a script that may predate all other writing in Mesoamerica, but like their language, it remains tantalizingly unreadable. Was it a priestly code, a calendrical system, or something far stranger? An ideological cipher meant only for the initiated? Walk the raised platforms of La Venta at sunrise and you might have felt the heartbeat of an empire, the murmur of priests chanting beneath monumental altars, the hiss of incense smoke spiraling skyward, the footfalls of dancers weaving through columns of carved stone animals, jaguars poised to pounce, serpents coiling in eternal vigilance. Their art fused human and beast, sensual curves and geometric rigor, infantile statuettes, perhaps honoring fertility goddesses, jaguar-human hybrids embodying the primal power of the earth and sky. Each motif echoed through time, reappearing centuries later in Maya temples and Aztec codices, a haunting ripple of influence from a civilization that chose silence over record. Then, around 400 BCE, as inexplicably as they had risen, the Olmecs slipped back into shadow. Their great centers were abandoned, their monuments left to be reclaimed by vines and earth. Mainstream archaeologists point to environmental upheaval, floods that washed away fields, volcanic eruptions that darkened the skies, or shifting trade routes that diverted precious jade and obsidian to new markets. Political fracturing may have spurred exodus as competing clans splintered and marched away, seeking fresh ground. Yet none of these explanations feels wholly satisfying. Why would a civilization with such mastery of stone and water leave behind monuments carved with so much care? Why abandon not only cities, but the very scripts they had labored to trace? Fringe theories whisper at the edges of academia. Perhaps the Olmecs possessed forgotten technologies, rudimentary cranes or water-powered conveyors that vanished with their builders. Some suggest ancient visitors from distant lands taught them stone-lifting secrets now lost to time. Others wonder if the Olmecs encoded celestial knowledge in their alignments, marking solstices and equinoxes in stone circles now swallowed by forest. Each idea flickers with possibility, refusing to be extinguished even as the jungle presses in. Today, as we clear away roots and sediment, new clues surface. A cache of jade figurines arranged in ritual precision, a series of drainage channels hinting at complex urban planning, fragmentary glyphs waiting for the key to unlock their meaning. But with every discovery comes deeper mystery. The Olmecs remain a riddle of artistry without autobiography, engineering without archives. And perhaps that was their intention, to speak to us not in words, but in stone, leaving an echo that resonates across centuries. So we stand among those silent sentinels, feeling the weight of absence and the pulse of human ambition entwined. We wonder what songs were sung at Laventa's twilight ceremonies, what names whispered in the smoky dawns, what dreams formed in the minds of the stone carvers as their chisels struck granite. And as the first rays of sunlight pierce the canopy, illuminating the ancient faces, we carry forward their enigma into the next chapter of our journey, toward the rose-red cliffs of Petra and the rock-carved city of the Nabateans. In the stillness before sunrise, the desert air shimmers with secrets, and every grain of sand seems to pulse with a hidden heartbeat. You step into a narrow gorge, its walls towering like silent sentinels, guiding you deeper into the earth's embrace. Then, without warning, a single ray of morning light strikes the rose-hued rock ahead, and Alcazna, the fabled treasury of Petra, unfolds before you like a dream carved in stone. Here, where wind and sandstone dance in perpetual embrace, the Nabateans forged a city against all odds, out of parched rock and whispered trade routes. Long before any imperial legion set foot in Arabia, the Nabateans were desert wanderers of uncanny resourcefulness. They read the stars to chart their caravans, coaxed water from hidden aquifers with tunnels that ran beneath the dunes, and wove an economy of incense, spices, and silk through the sands into the heart of the ancient world. Their legacy is not shouted in triumphal arches, but murmured in the trickle of spring water, diverted into hidden cisterns, and inscribed in a graceful script, Nabatean Aramaic, surviving only on shards of pottery and the occasional funerary stone. By the 1st century BCE, Petra had become more than a caravan station. It was a sanctuary of ingenuity. Drink from a carved basin at dawn, and you'd taste the cool spring water that engineers funneled through miles of stone channels, kept safe from evaporation by buried aqueducts. Stroll through its colonnaded streets at midday, and you'd hear the soft jingle of bronze scales weighing frankincense from Sheba, or frankincense-laden caravans returning from distant Yemen. Wealth was measured in fragrance and silk, in olive oil and gold dinars stamped with the likeness of King Aretas IV. Yet the Nabateans chose to honor their monarchs not with marble thrones, but with the silent grandeur of tomb-carved cliffs. Approach the treasury's ornate facade and trace the Corinthian columns carved from living rock, each frieze and pediment hewn with precision that defies belief. No scaffold supported those artisans, no mortar bound those stones. Some scholars believe the treasury was never a vault of riches, but a cenotaph, a golden script in sandstone to immortalize a king whose body never remained. Others see in its symmetry a stage for rituals that bound tribal confederations in shared awe. Whichever its purpose, the treasury remains a riddle, a monument to ephemeral power made permanent in desert stone. Elsewhere, royal tombs crown the cliffs in silent rows, their entrances shaped like ornate doorways to the underworld. Descend into those vaults and you'll find chambers dark as eternity, lit only by shafts of sunlight slipping through rock fissures. Here, amid fallen capitals and empty sarcophagi, you might sense the rustle of robes once worn by priests, the clink of votive offerings laid before statues, now erased by centuries of wind and dust. Under Aretas IV's reign, 9 BCE, 40 CE, Petra thrived as a diplomatic crossroads. Nabatean ambassadors negotiated with the Seleucids to the north, bartered with Roman emissaries at distant outposts, and maintained autonomy not through walls of stone, but webs of alliance. Coins bearing Aretas's profile travelled from Antioch to Alexandria, tiny ambassadors of the desert kingdom. Then came 106 CE, when Rome at last annexed Nabatea. The last king, Rabble II, vanished from history, as quietly as his ancestors had carved their tombs. With Roman rule came new roads that bypassed the Sikh, the narrow canyon entrance to Petra. Maintenance of the secret waterworks waned, cisterns silted, channels collapsed. Trade caravans drifted toward paved highways, leaving Petra's markets hushed and empty. Yet the city did not die in a day. In the Byzantine era, churches rose among the tombs, crosses were scratched into temple walls, Christian monks lauded their faith in Greek graffiti. But by the 7th century, Petra's wells ran dry for travellers, and the desert reclaimed its dominion. For centuries, only Bedouin tribes knew the treasury's hidden beauty, guiding wanderers through shifting dunes to its rose-red portal. In 1812, Johann Ludwig Burckhardt posed as a pilgrim, coaxed a local guide to lead him through the Essig, and emerged blinking into the golden light, reintroducing Petra to the Western world. Modern archaeology has since revealed fragments of glass workshops, olive presses and caravanserai where merchants once rested. Ground-penetrating radar hints at buried streets and unmapped cisterns. Yet for every excavation, new mysteries surface. Graffiti in scripts yet undeciphered, hidden chapels encrusted with mosaic tesserae, subterranean reservoirs echoing with the drip of unseen springs. Whispers of celestial alignments persist. Some researchers claim the treasury's facade aligns with Orion's belt at dawn, transforming rock into a cosmic calendar. Others propose that Petra's layout mirrors the constellations themselves, a desert temple of sky and stone. While mainstream scholars remain careful, Petra's silence begets speculation. Was it simply a hub of commerce, or a sacred city tuned to celestial rhythms? But the greatest mystery remains the Nabateans' choice of ephemerality over eternity. They carved their legacy into cliffs and let their chronicles drift into the sand. Perhaps they understood that stone can outlast parchment, that questions endure longer than answers. And in Petra's rose-red glow, those questions still beckon. As the canyon cools into twilight and the treasury's shadow stretches across the sand, we leave behind the ingenuity of the Nabateans and turn our gaze northward to the high plains of Anatolia, where fortress walls and cuneiform tablets await. The formidable Hittite Empire. Under a blood-red sunset, imagine the wind whispering through broken gates and across ramparts that once echoed with the thunder of chariot wheels. You stand before the ruins of Hattusa, capital of the Hittite Empire, where colossal cyclopean walls crouch like slumbering giants over the Anatolian plain. Here, in the shadow of those honey-colored stones, lies the story of a power that rose to rival Egypt, forged the world's first known peace treaty, and then vanished into silence. By the 14th century BCE, the Hittites had carved an empire out of rugged hills and fertile valleys. They mastered iron smelting long before their neighbors, equipping chariots with blades that shredded ranks and leaving the leather armor of foes in tatters. Imagine the clang of the blacksmith's hammer ringing through Hattusa's workshops, sparks dancing as artisans drew molten metal into swords destined to shape history. The empire's heartbeat in vast palaces crowned by sphinxes and winged lions, symbols of a civilization that embraced both Mesopotamian gods and native storm deities under one pantheon. Walk beneath a restored lion gate, 2 stone lions flanking a triangular portal, and you feel the weight of those who passed before, envoys from Egypt bearing gifts of lapis lazuli, Babylonian scribes impressed by Hittite laws codified on clay tablets, ambassadors from Mycenae offering olive oil in return for copper. At Hattusa's inner sanctum lay the royal archives, thousands of cuneiform tablets, each one a fragment of diplomacy, treaties, correspondence, divination reports, and legendary accounts of battles where Hittite charioteers shattered Egyptian lines at Kadesh. This was the largest horse-drawn engagement of the ancient world, a testament to Hittite mastery of speed and steel. Yet for all their martial prowess, the Hittites prized negotiation nearly as much as conquest. In 1258 BCE, they penned the Treaty of Kadesh with Pharaoh Rameses II, a pact so nuanced that a replica now hangs in the United Nations as a symbol of peaceful resolution. Under its terms, each power agreed to mutual defense, extradition of fugitives, and borders recognized by both scroll and seal. Imagine the scribe's careful strokes etching divine guarantees into wet clay, binding two of antiquity's greatest empires in words rather than blood. But behind those diplomatic triumphs lay a court rife with intrigue. Royal succession was never guaranteed. Clay tablets hint at palace coups, rumors whispered of assassinations by poison, and priests consulted oracle bones each dawn to discern the will of gods whose names we can barely pronounce. Did fear of divine wrath temper the king's ambition? Or did ambition itself become a divine mandate, driving Hittite armies deep into Syria and even to the Mediterranean's shimmering edge? By 1200 BCE, however, a storm was gathering, one not measured by tablets or chariots, but by smoke and silence. The so-called Bronze Age collapse swept through the eastern Mediterranean like a scythe. Cities burned, trade routes fractured, and the voices of scribes fell mute. In Hattusa, fire consumed palace archives, temples lay in embers. Yet, unlike other victims of this upheaval, the Hittites did not perish in a single cataclysm. There is no layer of ash marking a decisive siege, no mass grave of bodies frozen in panic. Instead, the empire unraveled as provinces slipped away, one by one, under pressure from famine, internal revolt, and marauding sea peoples whose true origins remain a riddle. Some scholars point to prolonged drought, evidenced by tree-ring data, showing scant rains in Anatolia's highlands. Without reliable harvests, the granaries that fueled Hattusa's armies ran empty, eroding the population's faith in a divine right monarchy. Other experts highlight seismic activity. Earthquakes in the region might have toppled walls and silenced cults overnight. Fringe theories even propose that the empire fell victim to an epidemic. Trace elements of ancient DNA hint at plagues that left no inscriptions, only genetic echoes in modern populations. Today, Hattusa's ruins rise like broken teeth against a cobalt sky. The royal gate, flanked by striding sphinxes, still holds its carved lions aloft, as though daring time itself to topple their vigil. Walk through the great temple of the storm god at Yazilikaya, and the rock reliefs preserve a divine procession, gods carved in high relief, leading one another toward an unseen realm. Some researchers believe these carvings record astronomical events, perhaps eclipses or solstices, encoded by priest astronomers in stone. Could the Hittites have owned a proto-science of the skies that guided their rituals and calendars? Amid these stones, the greatest mystery remains why the Hittites left neither grand epics nor dynastic annals beyond those scorched tablets. Unlike the Egyptians who carved their kings' deeds on temple walls beside images of gods, Hittite art is understated. Understated symbols impressed in clay, ritualistic bull leaping depicted in relief, iconography that speaks in whispers. Was this humility or a deliberate obscurity, a strategy to conceal their knowledge from rivals? And then there are the unanswered questions that linger as the wind sighs through collapsed gates. What counsel did advisors offer when the empire's coffers echoed empty? Which oracles foretold the fall, and did anyone heed their warnings? Did the last Hittite king ride into exile, or did he surrender his crown in some silent ceremony lost to the ages? As the sun sets behind Hattusa's stone walls, Those answers drift away like the dust stirred by our feet. Yet the stones themselves still speak, if we know how to listen. Through alignments that mark the solstice sun, through fragments of treaties that remind us of the power of words, and through the echo of those first iron-struck swords that reshaped warfare. From this crucible of martial innovation and diplomatic craft, we take the lesson that empires may rise on steel and treaties, but their endurance depends on the fragile balance of nature, faith, and human will. As twilight deepens and Hattusa's gatekeepers bow to the night, our journey carries us across sea and time to the island palaces of Crete, where another civilization awaits, one bathed not in iron's glow, but in the soft, sensual light of frescoed walls. The Minoans. Beneath a sky brushed with the first pale strokes of dawn, the stone walls of Knossos glimmer like living flesh, as if the palace itself breathes in the morning light. Here on the island of Crete, more than 4 millennia ago, a civilization unlike any other took root, an ocean-touched tapestry of art, faith, and mystery that we call the Minoans. As you step into their world, the air still carries the echo of bronze-struck hammers, the heady scent of harvested olives, and the distant crash of waves against rocky coastlines. From around 2000 BCE to 1450 BCE, the Minoans built sprawling palaces at Knossos, Phaistos, Malea, and Zakros, complex multi-storied compounds woven together by corridors, open courtyards, and light shafts that danced with sunbeams. Unlike the fortress-like citadels of contemporaries elsewhere, these palaces lacked defensive walls. Their very openness spoke volumes, a society confident in maritime trade rather than spear and shield, a people who welcomed merchants and pilgrims through grand entrances adorned with painted frescoes. And what frescoes! Imagine walls alive with cobalt and crimson, dolphins leaping through crested waves, graceful women twirling lilies in swirling skirts, bulls captured mid-vault in an eternal dance. Each brushstroke whispers of religious rituals, bull-leaping ceremonies where young acrobats vaulted over horns in rites that bound community and cosmos, and of daily life suffused with beauty. You can almost hear the hushed murmur of priests chanting beneath columns painted to resemble palm trees, swaying in a warm breeze. Yet, for all their artistic brilliance, the Minoans left no stone tablets of epic poetry, no carved royal decrees. Their script, Linear A, remains tantalizingly unreadable, ink light on clay, teasing us with glimpses of a language lost to time. Scholars debate whether it recorded commerce, sacred hymns, or secret knowledge known only to priestly elites. And when Linear B, the Mycenaean adaptation, later appeared, it spoke Greek, not Minoan, an indication that Crete's original voice had already begun to fade. Then came a cataclysm. Around 1600 BCE, the island of Thera, modern Santorini, erupted in one of history's greatest volcanic blasts. Ash plumes darkened skies as far as Egypt. Tsunamis may have scoured Cretan shores. Yet the dates don't align perfectly with the Minoans' decline. Some sites continued to flourish for decades afterward, suggesting resilience rather than immediate collapse. Was Thera a catalyst, or a convenient scapegoat in the narrative of downfall? Mainstream archaeologists point to a mosaic of causes. Environmental upheaval, floods, droughts, and crop failures might have strained food supplies. Political fragmentation could have opened the door for Mycenaean Greeks to assert influence, eventually supplanting Minoan elites. Earthquakes, common in the seismic Mediterranean, may have weakened palace structures, interrupting religious ceremonies and administrative functions. Inscriptions hint at Mycenaean worship taking root at Knossos, where cult images morphed to suit new gods. Yet speculation persists at the edges of convention. Fringe theories conjure visions of Atlantean refugees carrying secret technologies to Sicily, or of Minoan priestesses wielding esoteric rites that could calm volcanoes or rile them. Some suggest a sudden plague, unrecorded in clay, swept through the dense palaces, leaving corridors empty of footfalls and frescoes flickering alone in candlelight. Others imagine cult schisms so profound they shattered the spiritual unity that once underpinned Minoan cohesion. Walking through the grand staircase at Knossos today, you can sense the impermanence beneath the splendor. Plaster chipped away, columns risen from fallen tiles, intricate patterns fractured by root and rain. Yet restoration efforts, painstakingly reconstructing fresco fragments on modern plaster, also reveal astonishing care, as if each fragment is a heartbeat of a civilization refusing to be erased. And then there is the labyrinth, the myth of the Minotaur's maze, born from this very palace's twisting corridors. Could the legend be a distant echo of rooms sealed off for sacred rituals? Did these secret chambers house offerings to a bull god whose worship bound the people together? Or is it a story woven by later storytellers to explain their awe at Crete's complex architecture? Whatever the truth, the labyrinth stands as a metaphor for our quest, to navigate layer upon layer of myth and material, searching for the living soul of a vanished people. By 1450 BCE, the Minoans had slipped into the shadows. Mycenaean conquerors held Knossos, but the artistry that once flowed in vivid spring blues and sunflower golds waned into muted ochres. Linear A fell silent, replaced by Linear B. Temple rituals became Greek, and Crete's independent spirit merged into the broader currents of Aegean power. Yet in their absence, the Minoans left an indelible impression. The notion that civilization could be built on openness, on celebration of nature's forms, on a delicate balance between human artistry and the forces of earth and sea. Today, as archaeologists brush away centuries of dust, fragments of pottery and bits of fresco piece together lives lived in harmony with the Mediterranean's ebb and flow. Under ultraviolet light, buried pigments glow like embers, hinting at colors unseen for millennia. Ground-penetrating radar reveals courtyards still intact beneath collapsed walls. Each discovery pulses with the hope that we might yet read Linear A or find a hidden archive in a sealed chamber. And so, from the sunlit courtyards and frescoed halls of the Minoans, our journey now carries us north and west, across deserts and canyons, to the cliff-draped dwellings and celestial alignments of the ancestral Puebloans, the Anasazi. In the pale light of dawn, as the desert winds hold their breath, the cliffs of the Four Corners region reveal a marvel frozen in time, stone villages woven into the very fabric of canyon walls, like swallows' nests clinging to rock. These are the ancestral Puebloans, known to later generations as the Anasazi, architects of a world where community and cosmos met in red sandstone alcoves. Imagine standing at the rim of Mesa Verde, the sun gilding ancient timbers, and feeling the whispered heartbeat of a civilization that thrived between 600 and 1300 CE, then slipped away into the silence of shadowed caverns. Their greatest masterpiece lay in Chaco Canyon, where Pueblo Bonito rose from the desert floor in a labyrinth of 200 rooms, soaring 4 stories high. Step inside those silent corridors, and you almost hear the echo of footsteps on packed earth floors, the flicker of torchlight dancing against curved plaster walls. Above you, timber beams, some weighing hundreds of pounds, spanned distances of more than 50 meters, hauled by hands that knew both sweat and song. Here, in a land with no coaxing rains, the Puebloans coaxed life from arid soil, through ingenious water catchments and terrace farming, turning scarcity into abundance. Beyond the great houses, straight roads stretched across the wasteland like golden threads, visible even from the sky. These sun paths, as some call them, led to distant outposts and sacred sites, guiding pilgrims under sun and star. In the shadow of Fashada Butte, a spiral petroglyph catches the solstice sun, marking the passage of time with crystalline precision. Imagine the hush as onlookers watched that single ray illuminate the circle, ancient astronomers reading the sky as though it were a page in a sacred text. Yet, for all their technical prowess, the Puebloans left no grand epics carved in stone, no royal tombs to glorify kingly lineages. Their legacy lay instead in kivas, circular ceremonial chambers sunken into the earth, where the rope-hung sipapu symbolized emergence from primordial worlds. Here, beneath low-hanging beams, priests traced symbols in the smoke of copal incense, weaving prayers to Corn Mother and Sky Father. What rituals concluded at the crawl hole's threshold, we can only guess from carved benches and shadowed niches. By the late 13th century, however, those enormous dwellings were abandoned. Tree ring data tells of decades-long droughts that withered corn and sapped reservoirs. Deforestation for construction and firewood accelerated erosion, tipping the fragile balance of desert agriculture. Some rooms bear scorch marks, evidence of internal strife or ritual closure, while others stand pristine as though their occupants departed in haste or with solemn intent. Did hungry families drift southward toward the Rio Grande? Did clan disputes fracture communal bonds? Or did ancient prophecies demand a ceremonial departure, sealing ceremonial kivas forever? Oral traditions among modern Hopi and Zuni speak of walking into the hidden lands, of migrations that carried Puebloan souls across mesas and mountains. These stories are cloaked in symbolism, refraining from literal explanation, yet hinting at spiritual journeys as much as physical exodus. Perhaps the people chose transformation over collapse, exchanging cliffside permanence for a nomadic faith that lives on in dances and prayers today. Scholars pore over petroglyphs and pottery shards to reconstruct social hierarchies, chiefly herds of turquoise jewelry, elaborate ceremonial vessels smashed in ritual decommissioning, roads that seem to ignore practical terrain in favor of astronomical alignments. But the deeper mystery persists. How did a culture so intimately attuned to sky and stone vanish almost without trace? Unlike kingdoms undone by conquest or cataclysm, the Anasazi disappeared gently, leaving behind only the soft glow of fading embers and the whisper of wind through empty rooms. At Balcony House, a collapsed wooden ladder hints at escapes in the night, at families lowered into ledges to elude unknown threats. At Hovenweep, square towers rise improbably from flat canyon floors, their carefully fitted stones defying seismic logic. These sentinels watch silently as the seasons pass, monsoon rains drumming their roofs, winter snows spilling down broken walls. What messages did their builders intend for future eyes? What warnings or wisdom did they carve into those stubby bastions? And then there are the roads, lines etched across ravines and plateaus, their straightness impossible to ignore. Were they practical trade routes or ceremonial arteries pulsing with pilgrim footfalls? Some suggest they linked sacred sites in a network of pilgrimage, each path resonating with prayers and chants carried on the wind. Others propose they were symbolic lines, guiding the sun's journey across the sky in earthly form, a living mandala of red earth and blue horizon. Fringe theories whisper of contact with distant peoples, clues in maize DNA, ceramic motifs resembling Mesoamerican styles, hints that Puebloan traders once reached the Gulf of California. While mainstream archaeology remains cautious, The possibility tantalizes. Could ancestral Puebloans have been the vital link in pre-Columbian exchange networks stretching beyond the southwest? Today, as archaeologists brush away centuries of dust, they uncover hidden offerings in sealed rooms, corn kernels, seashells, fragments of obsidian, each a prayer or gift to ancestors. They map buried structures with LiDAR technology, revealing entire villages submerged beneath pinon and juniper. Every corridor revealed, every ceramic shard dusted free, is a step closer to hearing those lost voices, a chance to glimpse a society that balanced survival in a harsh landscape with awe-inspired artistry. And yet, the heart of the mystery remains not in what we find, but in what we do not. No written chronicles, no epic ballads sung of battles or kings. The Anasazi spoke through stone and ceremony, through silent rooms and celestial alignments, leaving us to piece their story from the spaces between walls and the curve of a kiva bench. As the sun sets behind those red cliffs, casting long shadows across abandoned plazas, we step back from the rim, minds alight with questions, hearts stirred by the echo of departed footsteps. Our journey now carries us across distant fields and ancient spirals to a land where concentric villages once burned in ritual cycles, the enigmatic Cucuteni Tripilia culture. In the silken light of dawn, when mist drifts like a spectre across endless fields, the land of modern-day Ukraine, Moldova and Romania once bore witness to a marvel beyond imagination, the Cucuteni Tripilia culture. Over 7,000 years ago, long before Stonehenge or the Great Wall, these people carved spirals into clay and earth, settlements so vast they housed up to 15,000 souls, their homes arranged in concentric circles that echoed the very rhythm of life itself. Picture a town laid out like a living mandala. From the air, it resembled a flower in bloom, houses built of timber and daub forming perfect rings around a central plaza. Each dwelling shared walls, warmth, and purpose, while narrow lanes wound gracefully between them. Underfoot, the clay compound of the plaza still pulses with the footfalls of ancestors who once gathered here for markets, festivals, and sacred rites. The rhythm of communal life beat in the pottery workshops, where clay spun on simple wheels into bold vessels painted with spirals, meanders, and stylized human and animal forms, symbols whose meanings we still strive to decode. Yet, it is the culture's most astonishing ritual that lingers in memory: the intentional burning of entire settlements. Archaeological layers reveal ring after ring of charred clay foundations, each one a deliberate act of destruction and renewal. Why would a people set their own homes ablaze? Was it a rite of passage, a spiritual cleansing to appease gods of earth and sky? Or did the conflagrations mark the end of one generation and the hopeful beginning of the next? Some scholars point to pest control or structural decay, practical reasons. Others invoke the cyclical philosophy implicit in their spiral motifs: life born from death, growth emerging from ash. Among the most enigmatic finds are thousands of figurines, often voluptuous female forms, their curves exaggerated, heads crowned with conical hats or halos. These goddess statues suggest a fertility cult, perhaps a veneration of the earth's generative power. In the same sites, dozens of clay altars bear geometric patterns that seem less decorative than coded: spirals nested within spirals, circles feeding into circles. Under the soft glow of torchlight, these symbols would have danced on walls, weaving cosmic maps that guided seasonal ceremonies and agricultural rites. Despite their prodigious craftsmanship, the Cucuteni Tripilia left no written records. Their language slipped into silence, surviving only in the shapes they carved. Yet what they sacrificed in ink, they gained in social cohesion. Excavations at Mileshti Meech and Talianki reveal public wells, communal granaries, and even proto-urban zoning, clusters of elite residences set apart from craft districts. Flint blades and copper adzes testify to extensive trade networks stretching to the Carpathians and Black Sea coasts. Each shard of obsidian, each bead of carnelian whispers of distant traders bearing goods and gossip. By around 3000 BCE, the fires that once cleansed their towns waned and then ceased. Climate shifts may have altered rainfall patterns, turning fertile plains into parched earth. Soil exhaustion, deforestation, or waves of nomadic incursions could have fractured their settlements. Yet the final chapter remains unwritten. No great cataclysm, no layer of ash to mark a singular doom, only the gradual fading of concentric rings into the encroaching steppe. Today, satellite imagery reveals outlines of buried villages, spiral shadows hidden beneath modern fields. Geophysical surveys hint at unexcavated altars and roads that once linked these communities. Each new discovery adds a brushstroke to the portrait of a civilization that challenged our assumptions, that cities must rise on conquest, that writing is the only vessel for collective memory. Instead, the Cucuteni Tripilia remind us that beauty, ritual, and communal spirit can be as enduring as any stone monument. What stories did mothers tell their children in those circular rooms? What songs echoed at the plazas as the last embers of one village still glowed, and the foundations of the next waited across the fields? Did they see in their spirals a celestial dance mirrored in the heavens? Or did the spirals simply reflect the inward journeys of the soul? As scholars pore over pottery fragments and figurines, each artifact sparks new debates and deeper appreciation for a people whose artistry still captivates. And so, as the spiral earth of the Cucuteni Tripilia dissolves once more beneath the till of centuries, we leave the quiet genius of Neolithic Europe behind. Ahead lies a land of emerald jungle and stone temples, where pyramids rise in careful alignment with Venus, glyphs whisper cosmic secrets, and an empire of scholars and warriors once held sway, the Maya civilization of the southern lowlands. In the half-light before dawn, the jungle holds its breath. A single golden shaft of sunlight pierces the canopy, illuminating a staircase carved into ashlar limestone, each step a verse in a 1,000-year-old hymn to the stars. Here, in the southern lowlands of modern-day Guatemala and Mexico, the Maya built cities that sang to the heavens: Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, Palenque. Names that still echo with the footfalls of scholars and the ghostly trumpet of howler monkeys, guardians of ruins overgrown by vine and time. Between 250 and 900 CE, the Maya transformed this humid expanse into a tapestry of pyramids, palaces, and plazas. At Tikal's Temple 4, crown yourself with dawn's first rays and feel the world awaken beneath your feet. Plazas flush with the colors of blooming saber trees, rooftops crowned by jaguar reliefs, and stairways carved with serpents twisting toward the sky. These stone giants weren't built by brute force alone. They were laid in precise alignment with solstices, equinoxes, and the movements of Venus, whose cycles governed agriculture, warfare, and royal succession. Imagine scribes in that sacred stillness, chiseling glyphs in stucco, recording omens of eclipses and eclipsed dynasties. Yet the Maya were more than astronomers. They were warriors, priests, and poets of the flesh. Blood rituals, considered essential to sustain the cosmos, unfolded beneath the moonlit ledges of hilltop temples. Inscriptions speak of the holy lords piercing their tongues or flaying their backs, offerings of royal vitality to feed sky gods. Human sacrifice, framed not as atrocity but as sacred duty, fed maize and rain gods alike. You can almost hear the rasp of obsidian blades, the tremor of trumpets, the chants that wove together clan and cosmos in a single breath. Walk beneath the corbelled vaults of Palank's Temple of the Inscriptions and study the bas-relief panel that chronicles King Pakal's journey from life to afterlife. His jade death mask still glimmers in museum vaults, but here, in situ, his image waits to greet your gaze, an invitation into a world where art was as vital as air. Every palace courtyard once pulsed with feathered serpent dancers, their costumes a riot of quetzal plumes and jade beads. Murals of courtly banquets and mythic battles breathe colour into cracked walls, weaving history and legend into patterns as complex as the painted glyph blocks that line ritual staircases. By the 9th century, however, the great cities fell silent. Tree ring data reveal consecutive decades of drought, reservoirs dried to dust, and limestone kilns that once produced plaster turned cold. Deforestation to fuel those kilns stripped soil of its lifeblood, while epidemics, unrecorded in stone but traceable in ancient DNA, may have swept across the highlands. Internal strife reflected in hastily chopped glyphs declaring new alliances or executions, hints at political fragmentation. Temple offerings cease abruptly. Some cities were carefully sealed, as if their caretakers left in reverence rather than haste. Why abandon such marvels? Why leave Palank's courts empty and Tikal's terraces to the creeping ivies? Was this a societal choice, ritual closure, a final act of stewardship before a mass migration? Or were they driven by desperation, famine, forcing families to flee the cradle of their ancestors? Oral traditions among Yucatec and Kekchi Maya today speak in metaphors of walking into hidden places, of ancestors who carried the knowledge of calendars and ceremonies into the forest, only to emerge somewhere else in the dawn of new worlds. Beyond mainstream theories of drought and overuse, fringe ideas whisper of cosmic omens, a comet that streaked across the sky as a harbinger of collapse, misread by priest astronomers whose calendars lost their grip on time. Some propose mass subterranean cataclysms, limestone caves collapsing beneath the weight of overpopulation, swallowing villages in shadowy gulfs. While these theories remain unproven, they underscore the profound mystery at the heart of the Maya story, advanced in science and art, yet vulnerable to forces both earthly and celestial. Today, modern LiDAR scans unveil vast networks of hidden cities beneath the canopy, arteries of causeways once thought impossible to map. Each new discovery ripples through our understanding, reminding us that the Maya were never just a southern lowlands phenomenon. They were a civilization of unimaginable reach, shaping the human story in ways we are only beginning to grasp. Their descendants, Quiche, Quicha, Mam, and others, still speak in languages descended from those glyphs, celebrating ceremonies beneath the very same ceiba trees. And as the overgrown temples whisper their secrets through moss and vine, and as the late afternoon sun bleeds crimson across stepped pyramids, we turn our gaze across oceans to a speck of earth where silence reigns supreme and stone sentinels stand like guardians of a vanished people. Next, we voyage to the remote shores of Rapa Nui, Easter Island. Beneath a blood-orange sunset, the Pacific holds its breath. Out here, 2,000 miles from any continental shore, rises a lonely speck of volcanic rock, Rapa Nui, Easter Island. The first thing that arrests your gaze is a row of stone sentinels, their backs turned to the sea. These are the Moai, colossal heads carved from tuff, some over 30 feet tall and weighing upwards of 60 tons, their deep-set eyes once inlaid with coral and obsidian, now hollow and haunting. When Polynesian voyagers stepped ashore between 800 and 1200 CE, they found an island draped in palm forests and alive with seabirds. Over generations, they learned to coax life from its thin soils, terracing sweet potatoes, raising chickens, and capturing every precious drop of rain in hidden cisterns. Yet their greatest achievement lay not in the fields, but in stone. At Rano Raraku, nearly 400 moai remain at various stages of carving, ghostly figures mid-creation, waiting in the quarry like statues dreaming of the sea. Moving these giants required ingenuity born of necessity. Without wheels or beasts of burden, the islanders may have walked the moai forward, rocking them in a choreography of ropes and chants, until they reached coastal ahu platforms. Imagine hundreds of men and women pulling in unison as the statues lurched forward inch by inch, guided by the rhythm of communal effort. Each ahu became a sacred throne, a burial vault where the mana, or spiritual power, of lineage chiefs was housed beneath stone eyes that watched over their people. These platforms themselves were carefully leveled and oriented. Some researchers note alignments between certain ahu and the solstice sun, suggesting that Rapa Nui was not only a realm of ancestors, but also a living celestial calendar. Pilgrimages along stone pathways would have marked seasonal rites, linking human lives to the turning heavens. By the 17th century, however, the island's legendary palms had vanished, felled to transport moai and fire ovens. With deforestation came soil erosion, crop failures, and dwindling wells. The Polynesian rat, introduced by settlers, devoured saplings and prevented forest regrowth, accelerating ecological collapse. Legends speak of a birdman cult supplanting moai worship, a desperate shift in belief as clans vied for limited resources. When Dutch navigator Jacob Roggeveen arrived on Easter Sunday 1722, he found toppled statues and a population ravaged by internecine conflict. In the 19th century, Peruvian slavers decimated the community, disease ran rampant, and by mid-1800s only a few hundred Rapa Nui remained. Their language fractured, their traditions nearly extinguished. Amid this turmoil, a curious script emerged, Rongorongo. Carved into wooden tablets, its glyphs may encode chants, genealogies, or star charts, but with fewer than 24 examples surviving, it defies translation. Each undeciphered symbol is a locked door, taunting scholars with the promise of lost knowledge. In recent decades, archaeologists have painstakingly re-erected fallen moai and mapped subsurface quarry roads using LiDAR. They've uncovered stone gardens and coastal rock fillings that hint at resilient agricultural systems. Community-led restoration projects now replant native trees and revive ancient ceremonies, blending modern science with ancestral wisdom. Yet, for all we've learned, Rapa Nui remains a riddle in stone and ash. Why devote generations to moving statues on an island with no walls or written histories? What final prayers did carvers whisper before slipping into silence? What lessons did they inscribe, not in clay or parchment, but in the very landscape, for those who would come after? As the last golden light fades from those silent sentinels, we leave their hollow gazes behind and turn our journey across oceans to a land of fortified citadels, lion-guarded gates, and clay tablets that recorded the affairs of kings and gods. Next, we stand before the ruins of Mycenae and the echoes of the Bronze Age. In the quiet glow of dawn, mist curls around the ancient stones of Mycenae's citadel, softening the edges of cyclopean walls that have stood sentinel for over 3 millennia. Here, at the Gate of the Lions, 2 imposing stone felines flank a triangular portal, their watchful eyes carved from single slabs of limestone. Step through this threshold, and you enter a world born of bronze and ambition, a realm where myths took shape in stone and power was measured in chariots, clay tablets, and the thunder of hooves against hardened earth. By the 14th century BCE, Mycenae had become the beating heart of a civilization that stretched its influence from the rugged Peloponnese to the coasts of Asia Minor. Kings ruled from the Megaron, great halls where courtiers feasted on barley gruel and prized olives, while tapestry-clad walls echoed with the strum of lyres. Above their heads, timber beams, some more than 15 meters long, spanned the breadth of these rooms, hauled from distant mountain forests by teams of laborers whose songs must have rivaled the hammer's ring in keeping time and morale high. Yet for all its grandeur, Mycenaean society thrived on meticulous record-keeping as much as on martial display. In the palace's inner sanctum lay clay archives inscribed in Linear B, ledger upon ledger of oil, grain, and rations dispersed to chariot crews and temple priests. These tablets, dry, precise, and utilitarian, offer a striking contrast to the epic verses of Homer that would echo down the centuries, immortalizing heroes like Agamemnon and Achilles. Here, reality and legend entwine. Was Agamemnon's fabled bronze breastplate inspired by the very swords and cuirasses catalogued in these archives? Did the poet's portrayal of Spartan alliances reflect coalition treaties once negotiated in these same palace chambers? Outside, the roar of chariots must have been as familiar as the wind. Mycenaean artisans mastered the forging of iron, an edge sharper and more durable than bronze, outfitting their riders with swords that could rend bronze shields in a single stroke. Hittite clay annals speak of Ahiyawa raiders, likely these Mycenaean warriors, clashing with Levantine armies under Syrian skies. Back home, artistic flourish met military might. Frescoes in Pylos depict boar-hunting elites brandishing curved daggers, their sinewy forms captured in pigments that still glow when illuminated by torchlight. But power in Mycenae was as much about diplomacy as dominance. The mask of Agamemnon, a gold death mask discovered in the treasury of Atreus, speaks to funerary rites that honored kings as both flesh and blood rulers and deified ancestors. Inscriptions hint at alliances sealed with marriage and feasting rather than by the sword alone. Gift exchanges, ivory inlaid with gold, jars of perfumed oil, traveled the craggy terrain, weaving a network of mutual obligation as strong as any fortress wall. Then, around 1200 BCE, the ground itself seemed to betray the Mycenaeans. A wave of destruction swept through the Aegean. Palace after palace fell silent, their archives charred or scattered. Earthquakes, common in this volatile region, may have toppled timber beams and cracked stone walls, but there was no single fall. No great battle left mass graves choked with victims. Instead, we find carefully sealed rooms, hastily broken Linear B tablets, and valuables left behind in storerooms. Was this the work of the enigmatic sea peoples, marauders who struck from the waves? Or did climate shifts, decades of drought marked in tree rings, strain resources until internal strife unraveled the social fabric? Rhetorical questions linger, echoing through empty megarons. What councils did Mycenaean elders convene as harvests failed? Which oracles warned of impending doom, and were their words heeded or cast aside? In the hush of those abandoned corridors, we feel both the echo of brass trumpets and the hush of resignation. Yet, even in collapse, Mycenae's legacy endured. Centuries later, Homer's verses would immortalize a golden age, turning historical echoes into epic myth. Frescoes and ivories inspired later Greek art. Linear B's decipherment in the 20th century confirmed that Mycenae was not mere legend, but a vibrant, literate, and stratified culture. Modern LiDAR surveys have revealed hidden road networks radiating from citadels, suggesting a level of urban planning rivaling any Bronze Age civilization. Fringe theories still weave tantalizing what-ifs: refugees carrying Mycenaean craft to Sicilian shores, secret archives buried beneath olive trees, or astrological codes embedded in the layout of chamber tombs. While mainstream archaeology remains cautious, such ideas underscore the irresistible pull of Mycenae's power, an empire that rose on steel and diplomacy, only to vanish in a twilight of stone and shadow. As dawn breaks fully across the Peloponnese, the Lion Gate stands quiet, its felines locked in eternal vigil. We step through the same threshold that once welcomed kings and poets, carrying with us the memory of a culture that balanced war and song, ledger and lyric, stone and story. And now, as the morning sun gilds the Megaron's fallen stones, our journey carries us across sea and time to a land of soaring obelisks, horn-crowned monarchs, and Christian stelae. The Aksumite Empire awaits. In the violet hush of dawn, the Ethiopian highlands awaken under a sky streaked with rose and gold. Amid rolling hills of dusty basalt, slender towers of stone pierce the morning mist. These are the stelae of Aksum, silent obelisks that once marked the heart of an empire straddling continents and faiths. As you stand among them, their carved, false windows and delicate reliefs seem to gaze back at you, whispering tales of kings and caravans, of faiths embraced and then transformed by the currents of history. From the 1st century CE, Aksum commanded trade routes that threaded the Red Sea to Arabia, the Nile to Nubia, and the Indian Ocean beyond. Salt from the Danakil Depression, gold mined in remote Ethiopian plateaus, ivory from Sudanese elephants, and frankincense from the distant dunes all flowed through the port of Adulis. Imagine thriving quays where Arab dhow captains and Roman traders haggled over silks and spices, guided by Greek-speaking interpreters. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea extols Adulis as a great emporium, its warehouses brimming with exotic wares destined for the courts of Rome and the markets of Persia. Back in the city of Aksum itself, kings sat beneath canopies carved from single blocks of sandstone. Nearby, towering stelae, some soaring over 70 feet, were erected as cenotaphs for illustrious rulers. Each shaft engraved with false doors and windows symbolized the gate to another world, a royal residence in the afterlife. How did artisans hoist these monoliths upright? We still lack complete answers. Ropes and earth ramps likely played a part, but the precision with which these slabs were quarried, trimmed, and balanced speaks to an engineering sophistication that belies any notion of a primitive desert society. By the 3rd century CE, Aksum began minting its own coinage, among the earliest in sub-Saharan Africa. Gold dinars bore the regal visage of King Ezana, who ruled from approximately 330 to 360 CE, while silvery fractional coins eased everyday commerce. The obverse side displayed a Christian cross, the reverse a profile of the ruler, and a halo of radiating lines. These small discs of metal circulated widely, asserting Aksum's political sovereignty and its pivot toward a new faith. Long before Constantine's Rome embraced Christianity, Aksum's own monarch, Ezana, traded the sun discs and animal deities of ancestral worship for the Christian cross. Inscriptions carved in Ge'ez, the ancient South Semitic script, appear on temple walls and coinage alike, proclaiming by the favor of the Trinity the king's divine right. Suddenly, the empire's temples echoed not with libations to Astar and Mahrem, but with hymns of praise to Christ the Saviour. Carved crosses atop stelae, once symbols of royal power, now declared a sanctuary of the spirit. Beyond archaeology and scripture, Aksum's mystique deepens in legend. Ethiopian tradition holds that the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest that cradled the Ten Commandments, found its final refuge in Aksum, carried there by Menelik I, son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. According to these tales, the Ark rests to this day in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, guarded by a solitary monk whose life is pledged to its secrecy. Whether myth or memory, this story underscores Aksum's role as both a powerful kingdom and a custodial centre of sacred mystery. By the 7th century, however, winds of change blew across the Red Sea. The rise of Islamic caliphates in Arabia disrupted maritime routes. Persian and Byzantine rivals vied for control of trade. Climate shifts, the so-called Late Antique Little Ice Age, may have altered monsoon patterns, straining agriculture in the highlands. Despite these pressures, Aksum did not collapse with fanfare. Rather, political power gradually waned, the stelae ceased rising, and grand palaces fell into disrepair as trade centres shifted toward the north. Inscriptions literally stopped, as if scribes laid down their chisels and walked away. Yet when we peer into centuries-old layers of loess and ash, we still glimpse fragments of pottery painted with geometric motifs, the faint remnants of murals in palace chambers, and coins scattered like oracle bones whispering of a storied past. Modern archaeology has rekindled Aksum's flame. LiDAR surveys map the outlines of forgotten city districts beneath thorny brush. Excavations uncover subterranean tombs carved into bedrock, their galleries lined with pillars and depictions of royal regalia. Ge'ez inscriptions, once weathered to illegibility, now yield their secrets under ultraviolet light. Each new artifact, a coin, a shard, a carved cross, becomes a brushstroke in the portrait of a civilization that bridged Africa, Arabia, and Europe.
And yet the greatest mysteries endure. How did Aksum's architects levitate monoliths without iron cranes? What council decreed the nation's christening by cross? How did an empire born of forest and plateau sustain itself when ancient waterways shifted and foreign fleets circled its shores? As we trace the footprints of caravan camels across faded trade routes, we feel the pull of those unanswered questions, a testament to the power of history's unfinished chapters.
In the lingering glow of Aksum's tallest obelisk, its shadow stretching long and silent, we prepare to cross the Red Sea once more, this time to the rugged hills and terrace fields of southern Arabia, where the kingdom of Himyar awaits, its own stone cities and shifting kingdom of Himyar. In the cool stillness before sunrise, the terrace-carved hills of southern Arabia lie cloaked in golden mist. Here, where rugged mountains plunge toward desert plains scented with frankincense and myrrh, rose the kingdom of Himyar, a power woven from trade, faith, and sheer will. Imagine a city carved into the cliffside, stone foundations terraced into the earth, inscriptions glowing in candlelight, and marketplaces echoing with the barter of spices, silk, and slaves. This was Yemen's crown jewel from the 2nd century BCE to the dawn of Islam, from tribal roots to trade titans. The Himyarites inherited the legacies of Saba and Qataban, blending caravan traditions with royal ambition. Nestled above precipitous wadis, their capital Zafar overlooked the incense routes that linked India's pepper to the Roman Empire's appetite for Eastern fragrances. Caravans halted at fortified way stations where scent merchants weighed frankincense tears against Byzantine coins. Every block of stone, every carved gate bore witness to a kingdom that thrived on connectivity long before the age of steam. Inscriptions in stone, the Musnad script. Walk along Zafar's weathered walls and you'll find inscriptions in Musnad script, lines of chiseled consonants declaring royal decrees, recording harvest yields, and consecrating temples. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, Musnad remained intimate and local, its angular letters etched by artisans whose mallets struck rhythms at once austere and lyrical. Yet most of these texts are short and cryptic, property grants, dedications to deities, or terse trade agreements. What epic tales of kings and courtiers once filled these pages before they were lost to sand and time? A nation-shifting belief. For centuries, Himyar's people worshipped a pantheon, daughters of the moon goddess, spirits of the oasis wells, and nature gods embodying vine and date palm. But in the 4th century CE, something radical stirred. Inscriptions hint at monotheistic proclamations. By the Lord of heaven and earth, they read, replacing tribal sigils with a single divine title. Under King Yusuf Azaryatha, known to later chronicles as Du Nuwas, Judaism became state faith, a choice that set Himyar ablaze in both conviction and controversy. And why would an Arab kingdom adopt Judaism of all belief systems? Political calculations played a part. Aligning against Christian Byzantium and Persian Zoroastrian influence offered independence from rival empires. Yet local traditions of scriptural learning and ancient ties to Jewish communities in southern Arabia suggest deeper roots. Did Yahweh's prophets speak through desert winds guiding Himyar's elite to embrace a covenant as binding as their trade alliances? Najran, persecution and retaliation. The turning point came at Najran, a Christian trading hub on Himyar's flank. According to chroniclers, thousands of believers were massacred over religious defiance, bodies cast into wells, churches razed to the ground. Archaeological layers in Najran reveal burned stone compounds and hastily shattered mosaics, bearing silent testimony to an atrocity that reverberated beyond Arabia. In response, the Christian kingdom of Aksum crossed the Red Sea with Byzantine support, invading Himyar around 525 CE. Du Nuwas fell in battle or fled into legend, as Christian rulers installed themselves in Yemen's highlands. Yet this was not mere conquest, it was a seismic shift in ideology. Temples were rededicated, inscriptions repurposed, and new churches carved into rock crevices once used for incense burners. Echoes in the earth. By the 7th century, however, Himyar's prominence waned. Islamic armies swept northward, trade routes reshaped, and the fertile terraces gradually reverted to wadi dust. Zafar's palace stones collapsed in silent defiance, its inscriptions bleeding into the earth. But for those who listen closely, faint traces remain. Fragments of Musnad tablets in hidden caves, overgrown dams channeling ancient irrigation, and the faint resonance of a people who once bridged continents through commerce and creed. Mysteries hidden in plain sight. What secrets did earlier Himyarite dynasties carve into their unexcavated necropolises? Could there yet be scrolls buried beneath cratered courtyards, waiting for an archaeologist's trowel to reveal lost wisdom? Fringe theories whisper of hidden tunnels connecting royal tombs, of esoteric rites tied to lunar cycles, or of alliances with civilizations now erased from memory. While concrete evidence remains elusive, these speculations underscore the kingdom of Himyar's enduring allure, a civilization forged in stone and faith, whose story beckons us to uncover what lies beneath the sands. As the dawn sun gilds the last monolithic gate of Zafar, casting long shadows across ancient walls, we prepare to journey westward, into the rolling vineyards and olive groves of central Italy, where another enigma awaits among cut rock tombs and painted feasts, the Etruscans. In the pale light of dawn, mist clings to the gentle hills of Tuscany, softening the outline of cypress trees and rolling vineyards. Hidden beneath this verdant landscape lie doorways hewn into rock, entrances to subterranean worlds painted in vibrant frescoes. Step inside and the walls erupt with color, couples reclining on dining couches, lyres cradled in delicate hands, dancers caught mid-twirl beneath geometric borders. These are the tombs of the Etruscans, a civilization that once thrived in central Italy from roughly 900 BCE to 100 BCE, leaving behind a legacy as enigmatic as the language they spoke. At the heart of Etruscan culture lay the necropolises of Cerveteri and Tarquinia, where families erected elaborate burial chambers to honor the departed. Unlike the somber mausoleums of their Roman successors, Etruscan tombs celebrate life's pleasures, feasting, music, and kinship. In the Tomb of the Leopards, two panthers crouch above a banquet scene where men and women dine side by side, a testament to social equality rare in the ancient world. Their names, inscribed in tomb niches, echo softly through the centuries. Arnth Veltimna, Larth Tetnes. Yet the words resist translation, for the Etruscan script, adapted from Greek letters, remains only partially deciphered. From bronze mirrors gleaming in sculptors' workshops to ornate bronze cauldrons used in ritual banquets, Etruscan artisans set the standard for Mediterranean craftsmanship. Their iron smiths forged weapons that armored hilltop citadels against Italic tribes, yet it was their diplomatic acumen, treaties with Greek city-states and alliances with early Rome, that cemented their power. Temple facades crowned with terracotta statuary once shimmered under sunlight, while underground cisterns and drainage channels spoke of hydraulic knowledge advanced for their time. In the Forum of Veii, the Arae Compitales, shrine altars at street corners, hosted neighborhood rituals that fused civic identity with daily life. Who were the Etruscans? Herodotus claimed they were refugees from Lydia, driven westward by famine. Dionysius of Halicarnassus insisted they were autochthonous to Italy. Modern genetics hints at a blend of local and Eastern Mediterranean ancestries, but no conclusive origin ties exist. Their tongue stands apart from Indo-European Latin and Greek, a linguistic island whose tomb inscriptions tantalize without fully revealing grammar or poetry. Did their songs once fill these banquet halls? What mythic sagas were whispered as libations bubbled in bronze cauldrons? Etruscan kings, or Lucumones, ruled through a delicate dance of ritual and display. In the lavish tomb of the augurs, painted figures mirror ceremonies under sacred oak groves, where priests read omens in the flight of birds. Ritual divination guided military campaigns and harvest festivals alike. Gold fibulae and decorative weaponry unearthed in princely burials attest to a social hierarchy, both opulent and deeply spiritual. Yet the Etruscans wielded their power with subtlety, influencing the early Roman monarchy through marriage alliances and cultural exchange rather than outright conquest. By the 4th century BCE, the rising Roman Republic cast its long shadow over Etruscan city-states. Wars ravaged hilltop strongholds, internecine conflicts sapped unity. One by one, citadels fell or were assimilated, their languages silenced in senate chambers. The tombs, once sealed with reverent rites, were plundered or forgotten beneath layers of earth. Yet even as the Etruscans faded from political prominence, their imprint on Rome endured. The sacred fasces carried by magistrates, the triumphal processions modelled on Etruscan ritual, and the art of the arch, borrowed and perfected by Roman engineers. Through the Renaissance, scholars rediscovered Etruscan art in scattered fragments: bronze chimera from Arezzo, gleaming with inlaid silver, terracotta sarcophagi brimming with mythic reliefs. Each piece sparked fantasies of lost temples and buried archives, libraries of bronze tablets that may have chronicled dynasties and creation stories. Fringe theories propose that secret Etruscan guilds passed esoteric knowledge to Roman priesthoods, embedding cryptic symbols in mosaics and frescoes. While little proof survives, the allure of a wisdom deliberately concealed continues to captivate imaginations. In the Via Appia's catacombs, Etruscan names carved in Latin letters testify to continued presence, families that adapted, intermarried, and watched as their customs merged into the burgeoning Roman identity. Festivals like the Ludi and the Saturnalia preserved echoes of Etruscan ritual, while gods such as Uni and Minerva found new life as Juno and Minerva. In this seamless blending, we glimpse a civilization that refused to vanish entirely, even as its cities crumbled. Today, as the morning sun gilds the chipped plaster of a tomb mural and restoration experts painstakingly piece together fragments of painted walls, the Etruscans speak again, through fragments of fresco, shards of pottery, bearing swirls of ochre and cobalt, and the hollow eyes of bronze mirrors reflecting our quest for identity. Each discovery invites us to step closer, to lean into the hush of ancient corridors, and to listen for the laughter that once echoed among the banqueters. And as the last light of dawn warms the carved shutters of Cervateri's tombs, we leave behind the Etruscans' painted halls and follow the Mediterranean currents westward. There, on the fringes of the known world, lay the fabled kingdom of Tartessos, rich in gold, shrouded in myth, and waiting to reveal its secrets. The air is thick with salt and sunrise as you step onto the tidal flats, where the Guadalquivir River meets the restless Atlantic. Reeds sway in gentle arcs, and the dawn sky blushes gold against the low horizon. Beneath your feet, mud clings like memory to the boots of those who walked here 3 millennia ago, merchants, kings, and sailors of a kingdom whispered in legend as Tartessos. Imagine the city alive, sun-drenched plazas ringed by whitewashed houses, their walls streaked with ochre frescoes. In the distance, slender masts of Phoenician ships drift toward bustling quays, their hulls weighed down with tin, copper, and silver, mined from inland veins. At the docks, traders from Sidon and Tyre barter ambergris and myrrh for the famed Tartessian gold, a metal so pure the Greeks called their realm Argyris, the Silver Land. Then, in 1958, ploughblades unearthed a cache that reignited the kingdom's glow, the treasure of El Carambolo. 21 golden plaques, collars, and diadems, each pattern etched with spirals and crescents, gleamed as though forged from the sun itself. Archaeologists still debate whether these were ceremonial regalia of a high priest or diplomatic gifts from Mediterranean potentates. Hold one in your hand, and its weight hums with the hands that shaped it. Treasure meant to dazzle, to proclaim power, and perhaps to tether mortals to the divine. Walk inland to the archaeological park at Doñana National Park, and you may glimpse fragments of stele carved with Iberian Phoenician letters. These angular signs, truncated consonants and looping curves, etched names, offerings, or contracts into stone. Yet, without a bilingual key, they speak only in tantalizing fragments, Eshni, Baal Lorenzos. What promises passed between merchant and noble? What hymns once rose from sun-bleached temples? The script's silence amplifies the kingdom's mystery, pulling us into a puzzle with missing pieces. By around 500 BCE, the golden arteries of Tartessos ran cold. Greek accounts vanish, Phoenician records grow vague. Mainstream scholars point to Carthaginian ambition, an empire born of Tyre that swept westward to secure Iberia's silver mines. Ruinous floods may have silenced river ports, while river courses shifted, stranding once bustling harbours under layers of silt. Soil exhaustion from overgrazing could have starved the hinterland, driving families to pack their goods and vanish into the hills. But can a civilization of such wealth and ingenuity truly dissolve under the weight of weather and war alone? Perhaps internal fracturing, factions vying for control of trade, undermined unity. Potsherds bear marks of hastily abandoned estates, as though a sudden decree emptied markets in a single night. Did political revolt ignite fires that consumed archives and palaces? Or did a shockwave of cultural trauma brought by foreign invaders or plague shatter faith in the old order? In the 4th century BCE, Plato penned Atlantis, not as history, but as moral allegory. Yet the parallels to Tartessos tug at our imagination. An advanced maritime civilization, opulent in metal and craft, swept into oblivion in a day and night of earth and sea. Could Plato's tale be an echo of Iberian truths filtered through Greek retellings? Or did the story of Atlantis shape the memory of Tartessos rather than the other way around? The boundary between myth and memory blurs on the salt marshes, where each wave seems to whisper a forgotten name. Today, remote sensing and ground-penetrating radar map the outlines of submerged quays and building foundations long buried beneath reed-choked wetlands. Core samples reveal sudden deposits of sand and clay, signs of catastrophic flooding that may have swallowed entire neighborhoods. Archaeologists brush away centuries of moss from carved altar stones, revealing traces of votive cups and oil lamps. With each layer peeled back, the kingdom breathes again, fragile but insistent in its testament to human ambition and vulnerability. And yet the greater marvel is not the treasure nor the trade, but the collective breath held by generations who witnessed glory and collapse. What songs did Tartessian bards compose as gold flows halted? What prayers did traders whisper when their vessels lay beached and rusted? In the hush of dawn, when the marsh mists swirl, you can almost hear their fading voices, a lament for a world so bright it could not endure. As the morning light strengthens and the silver gleam of long-buried hoards returns to the sun, we leave behind the marshlands of Tartessos and carry forward its lessons of splendor and loss. Across the Mediterranean, where mountains clasped the sea in a lover's embrace, another people carved their stories into stone. Next, we journey to the Lycians, guardians of cliffside tombs and stewards of secrets etched on rock faces. Mist drifts through the sea winds as dawn breaks over Lycia's jagged coastline, turning the cliffs to gilded stone. Far above the turquoise surf, you spot the facades of rock-cut tombs carved into sheer rock faces, granaries of memory hewn by ancient hands. This is Lycia, a land where the dead dwell among the living, and every chiseled doorway whispers secrets of power, faith, and innovation. Imagine stepping through a tomb portal at Myra, the air cool and still, the walls alive with faded frescoes, reclining figures clasping goblets, lyres ready to sing, and guardians in the form of winged creatures perched above banquet scenes. Here, men and women dined side by side, their names inscribed in the Lycian script, an angular alphabet derived from Greek, yet still stubbornly untranslatable. What stories did those names tell? Which epic sagas or love poems once danced on these walls before time erased their color? There, below you, the city unfolds in a tapestry of whitewashed houses and sun-baked courtyards. The Lycian League met in halls where suffets, elected magistrates, debated laws that bound 7 city-states in a confederation admired by Aristotle himself. No single monarch ruled here. Instead, power was shared, votes counted, and diplomatic skill prized above brute force. Imagine the clatter of feet on mosaic floors, the rise and fall of voices as each polis defended its interests for the good of all. Such political sophistication proved vital when Persian satraps arrived with demands for tribute and ships. At Xanthos, you can still see the reliefs of Lycian warriors standing shoulder to shoulder with Persian hoplites, their garments striated in terracotta and marble. Coins stamped with local symbols, lions, tridents, stylized sunbursts, bear witness to a realm at the crossroads of East and West. Phoenician traders brought cedar planks for ornate ship hulls, while Greek potters taught Lycian artisans to paint amphorae with meanders and mythic scenes. How did such small mountain communities absorb foreign influences yet retain a distinct identity? Beyond trade and politics, Lycia's spirit thrived in its worship. Shrines dedicated to Trucas, the Lycian storm god, sat atop rocky outcrops where priests read omens in thunderclaps and lightning forks. In secluded caves, votive offerings, bronze mirrors, miniature vessels, lay buried beneath calcite drips as if awaiting discovery in some distant age. Could these hidden sanctuaries have encoded lost ritual truths, known only to initiates who ventured in moonlight? Yet Lycia was not immune to the tides of history. By the Hellenistic era, Alexander's successors vied for control of Anatolia's riches, and Roman legions marched through Lycian passes. The Suffetes' power waned as governors replaced elected elders, and the mighty confederation dissolved into provincial order. Earthquakes, common in this restless land, toppled tomb facades and sent shards of funerary reliefs clattering like broken hearts onto ledges below. Ports silted, trade vessels found other harbors, and slowly the laughter that once echoed in marble megaron chambers fell silent. Still, Lycia's legacy clings to the cliffs. Restoration teams now use infrared imaging to reveal pigments hidden beneath centuries of soot, uncovering robes of crimson and azure once worn by the elite. LIDAR surveys map-buried city walls under thorny brush, and every broken inscription recovered is a puzzle piece in a mosaic of vanished voices. Each discovery reminds us that history is carved not only in tablets or scrolls, but in living rock above the restless sea. What compelled the Lycian dead to reside in grand temples cut into towering cliff faces? Was it a desire to safeguard lineage beyond the grave, or a statement of mastery over nature's vertical domains? When the Suffetes cast their final votes, did they foresee their systems unraveling under foreign sway? What songs did poets compose as stones shifted in the earth and the salt air claimed their homes? And now, as the sun climbs to gild the highest sarcophagi and seabirds wheel above silent tomb doors, we leave behind Lycia's carved personas and political innovations. From these cliffside citadels, our journey continues westward across deserts and mountains to the Andean highlands, where two intertwined cultures, Harappa and Wari, crafted empires of earth and ritual. The echoes of their terraces and temples await our next discovery. Mist drifts across the terraced slopes of the Ayacucho Valley, where dawn's first light burns the night's chill away. But this quiet land conceals an even quieter secret. Two intertwined cultures whose humble origins and sweeping innovations rewrote the possibilities of Andean life. Who were the Harappa, those early pioneers of organized community, and how did their legacy blossom into the Wari Empire, whose stone compounds and ceremonial centers rivaled anything the highlands had ever seen?
A whisper of clay and community.
Imagine small clusters of rectangular adobe houses scattered like stone seeds across sun-baked plains. This was Harappa society, c. 200 BCE 500 CE. Villages of modest stone foundations, each linked by narrow paths worn into the earth. Their hands moulded clay into vessels adorned with geometric spirals and abstract patterns, lines that spoke of ritual cycles, of births and harvests, etched in every coil and incision. These were not idle doodles, but a visual language in the making, a prelude to a more structured world to come. No towering pyramids rose here, and no grand plazas called travelers from afar. Instead, Harappa communities sustained themselves through localized irrigation channels fed by Andean springs, rotating crops of quinoa, beans, and tubers. Livestock grazed on scrub grasses, and seasonal gatherings brought neighbors together for shared feasts, moments when pottery clinked and the clay vessels themselves became communal totems. It was a society balanced on cooperation rather than conquest, a seedbed of social networks that primed the region for something far greater, the spark of transformation. Then, around 500 CE, something remarkable happened. Harappa villages gave way to a new force, Wari. Not through wholesale conquest, but by absorption and reorganization, the Wari inherited Harappa's patterns and amplified them. Suddenly, modest adobe compounds morphed into vast, fortified administrative hubs. At the heart of the Ayacucho Valley rose Wari itself, the Wari capital, sprawling across hundreds of hectares with straight roads radiating outward like the spokes of a cosmic wheel. Here, monumental architecture arrived, D-shaped temples whose curved walls embraced sun and sky, and multi-roomed palaces built from precisely cut stone blocks. Urban planning took root, districts for artisans, storage compounds for surplus crops, and corridors leading to enclosed plazas all spoke of an ideology more centralized and ambitious than anything before seen in the highlands. How did this transition occur so seamlessly? Perhaps Wari leaders offered the promise of security, shared rituals, or economic stability that Harappa communities had only glimpsed. Ceremony, control, and connectivity. In Wari society, the lines between the sacred and the administrative blurred. Massive breweries near elite compounds produced chicha, corn beer, for communal rites that bound citizens to both ancestors and state. Ceremonial vessels bearing human faces, some serene, others contorted, were deliberately smashed and buried as votive offerings. These acts were not mere spectacle, they were rituals of social cohesion, reinforcing Wari's spiritual and political hegemony. Trade networks unfurled like threads of gold and silver across desert coasts and mountain passes. Standardized Wari textiles and distinctive staff god iconography appear at sites hundreds of kilometers apart, testifying to an ideological reach that rivaled any later empire. Unlike the more fortress-like Harappa settlements, Wari outposts in the south and north functioned as nodal points of influence, centers where local elites adopted Wari styles to cement alliances, rather than being overtaken by force. Rise, reach, and retreat. For 5 centuries, Wari grew in strength, weaving a tapestry of influence across modern-day Peru. But by 1000 CE, the threads began to fray. Some temples were abandoned, corridors fell to rubble, and roads grew over with grass. Was it environmental stress, droughts that withered highland crops, or social tension, local elites chafing under distant control? Likely both, combined with shifting trade patterns that made other regions more attractive. Whatever the cause, Wari's collapse was not marked by fiery destruction, but by a quiet unraveling, a collective decision to step back from centralized rule.
What echoes remain?
Today, aerial surveys reveal the faint outlines of Wari roads snaking between mountain ranges. Pottery shards lie scattered like fallen memories across terraces, once alive with song and ceremony. And beneath it all, scattered Harappa foundations whisper of a gentler past from which Wari drew its earliest breath. What drove Harappa communities to forge cooperative irrigation systems on an unforgiving landscape? How did Wari architects perfect stone-cut terraces without iron tools or beasts of burden? And why did both cultures, one emerging from modest clay, the other rising on ambitious stone, choose to leave so much behind, only to vanish into the thin mountain air, as the highland winds carry the ghosts of these builders through terraced fields and eroded chambers? Our journey now turns to an even more ancient mystery. Stone circles beneath Sahara's desert sky. Let us follow the path to the lost observatories of the Nabta Playa culture. In the thin morning air of the Sahara, the world seems to hold its breath. A pale sun rises over a flat basin studded with wind-scoured stones, and for a moment you might believe nothing ever stirred here. Yet more than 7 millennia ago, in this very place now called Nabta Playa, people gathered on the shores of a vanished lake to perform rituals that mapped sky and earth alike. Imagine standing among them, the air cool, the horizon ringed by distant hills, as herders led their cattle to graze on green grasses that flourished only when the monsoons came. They were not simple nomads drifting with the seasons, but custodians of an astonishing legacy. At the basin's center, massive slabs of stone, each carefully chosen and tilted, rise like the ribs of a buried creature. These megaliths form circles and alignments so precise that today's astronomers still marvel at their mapping of the summer solstice sunrise and the rising of Orion's belt. Why carve such monuments without mortar or metal? Was it to measure time, to announce planting seasons, or to chart the passage of souls from Earth to the stars? Nearby, small stone tumuli conceal cattle bones laid in ceremonial pits. No ordinary refuse heaps, these burials speak of reverence for the beasts that sustained human life here. The cattle cult of Nabta Playa wove animal and human destinies into a single tapestry, each bovine sacrifice an offering to powers beyond the desert's vast emptiness. What stories did the herders whisper around nightly fires, their shadows dancing against upright stones as incense smoke curled toward constellations painted across the black sky? Mainstream scholars see in Nabta Playa's circles the first seeds of Egyptian ritual architecture. Centuries before pyramids pierced the Giza plateau, these Saharan ancestors measured solstices and celestial events, creating one of Africa's earliest known astronomical observatories. Yet their monuments were not mere centers of observation, they were stages for communal ceremony. Imagine the hush as the first light of the solstice crept over the horizon, illuminating stone faces that had waited through countless nights for this singular moment. Still, the desert holds more than academic clues. Fringe theories propose Nabta Playa as the meeting point of forgotten civilizations, a proto-scientific cradle where early humans encoded complex knowledge of geometry and cosmology into stone. Some even draw parallels between these megaliths and those scattered across Europe and Asia, suggesting a network of prehistoric sky watchers. Though concrete proof remains elusive, the very suggestion kindles our imagination. Could these Saharan circles be echoes of a shared human impulse to reach for the heavens? Then, as climate shifted and monsoon rains retreated south, the basin dried. The lake that once mirrored stars and stones vanished, herds moved on, and the circles lay silent beneath drifting sands. For millennia, Nabta Playa slept, its stones buried under wind and time, until modern archaeologists began to unearth its mysteries. Today, aerial surveys and ground-penetrating radar reveal outlines of buried circles and pathways. Sediment cores show layers of rapid deposition, signs of sudden flooding, that may have reshaped the landscape and driven communities to migrate. Every shard of pottery, every fragment of charcoal from ancient hearths speaks of human resilience and ritual precision. Each new discovery, whether a ceremonial hearth ring or a hidden trench, unlocks whispers of ceremonies whose meanings we can only glimpse. What hymns were sung as cattle were laid to rest? What prayers were inscribed not in clay or papyrus, but in the very alignment of stone and star? Standing here now among the weathered monoliths and whispering winds, you feel both the pulse of a forgotten world and its haunting absence. The cattle bones still sleep beneath mounds of earth. The stones still mark time even as days and centuries pass. And beyond these stones, stretching toward the west, lies another land where the first complex cities of the Americas rose, not by rivers, but by ocean tides and mountain snowmelt, a civilization known as Norte Chico, where rivers carve oases from desert and stone platforms testify to human ingenuity in the face of scarcity. Our journey now carries us from the silent plazas of Nabta Playa to the ghost cities of Peru's Norte Chico. As the coastal breeze carries a faint salt tang inland, you step onto the sands of Peru's Norte Chico region, an arid strip where the sun scorches earth so relentlessly that most would call it uninhabitable. Yet here, between 3000 and 1800 BCE, the world's first complex cities rose not by the fertile banks of a great river, but along desert valleys threaded with life-giving streams. It was in the Supe, Pativilca and Fortaleza river basins that the ancient architects of Norte Chico coaxed urban grandeur from parched plains, leaving behind pyramids of stone and earth that still defy our expectations of where civilization can flourish. Imagine the sight of Corral at dawn. Stepped platforms climb from the desert floor, their broad terraces catching the first golden rays. Below, sunken plazas form silent amphitheaters once pulsing with ritual dance and oratory. Monumental staircases, some over 20 feet wide, rise to central pyramids, while flanking mounds anchor the cityscape in a geometric harmony. These constructions predate Egypt's Great Pyramid by centuries, yet they stand without the benefit of pottery wheels, kilns, or written records. How did these builders sustain such monumental labor in a land of scarce rainfall? The secret lay in a dual economy of sea and desert. Anchovies and sardines, dried and packed in woven cotton sacks, provided reliable protein. Cotton itself was woven into nets that lifted the silver shoals from the Pacific's bounty. Inland, terraced fields along seasonal streams nurtured squash, beans, and guava, but it was the exchange of fish for agricultural produce that underpinned social cohesion. Can we imagine the network of reed vessels and human caravans traversing this fragile web of interdependence? Remarkably, Norte Chico left behind no pottery, no metal tools, and scant evidence of warfare. The lack of fortifications or mass graves suggests an era not defined by conquest but by cooperation. Without ceramic storage, grain was piled in sun-baked bins. Without written decrees, social norms were encoded in the very layout of their cities. Inscriptions? None survive. Yet in the careful symmetry of each pyramid, we read an unspoken charter. Together we build, together we endure. Archaeologists uncover circular sunken plazas ringed with benches, a design that recurs at multiple sites. These kiva-like spaces may have hosted communal feasts or astronomical observations, their floors marked by post holes that once held carved wooden pillars. At sunset, light would plunge into these concentric stages, spotlighting priests conducting ceremonies to bless the coming harvest. What hymns rose in that hush, and what cosmological knowledge guided their rites? In the absence of writing, Norte Chico's architecture served as a civic ledger. Each platform and stairway told a chapter of communal identity, each plaza a chapter in the season's cycle. Decorative motifs etched on stone vessels unearthed in tombs depict spirals and lattice patterns that mirror the textile nets and the woven rhythm of desert grasses. These pictograms hint at a symbolic language now lost to time, a code that spoke of lineage, ritual, and the intricate balance between sea and soil. By approximately 1800 BCE, the great plazas fell silent. The reasons remain debated. Climate records suggest shifting rainfall patterns that weakened the irrigation systems. Social stress may have emerged as populations swelled, or trade networks could have realigned to favor inland cultures rising in the Andes. Unlike the abrupt collapse of other ancient states, Norte Chico seems to have faded gradually. Platforms abandoned, terraces reclaimed by sands, and the people dispersing into new valleys in search of sustainment. What final deliberations took place in those sunken plazas as water channels silted and fish stocks dwindled? Did priests warn of famine or offer prophecies of migration? How did families decide to dismantle or desert the very edifices their ancestors had labored to erect? Each unanswered question deepens the resonance of these ruins, reminding us that even the mightiest urban ventures are at the mercy of nature's cycles and human adaptability. Today, satellite imagery reveals the ghostly outlines of dozens more Norte Chico sites, once invisible beneath desert patinas. As archaeologists map sunken courts and re-excavate platform walls, they piece together a narrative of innovation born from scarcity. The lesson echoes across millennia. Complex society does not demand rivers alone. It requires shared vision, resourcefulness, and a willingness to bind fate to the pulse of both land and sea. And so, as the Andean sun climbs over these ancient desert cities, we leave behind the silent pyramids of Norte Chico. Our journey now turns to the roiling waters of the eastern Mediterranean, where a different wave of history swept in. Ancient mariners known simply as the Sea Peoples. The roar of the eastern Mediterranean tides still echoes in the stone reliefs of Medinet Habu, where Pharaoh Ramesses III stands imperious before lines of defeated warriors. In the smoky dawn light, you can almost hear the clash of bronze shields and tridents splintering in the surf, sounds that heralded the end of an age. These figures, labeled in hieroglyphs as the Sea Peoples, emerged not as myth but as a force so formidable that they swept destruction across the late Bronze Age world between 1200 and 1150 BCE. Picture a convoy of wooden ships, hulls cracked by storms, sails patched with animal skins, pushing westward along the Levantine coast. Families, warriors, and livestock huddle on deck as they seek new shores. Egyptians call them Peliset. Hittites speak of Luca. Ugaritic texts warn of Shardana and Shikalesh. These names roll off the tongue like fragments of a lost incantation, each group distinct yet united by desperation. What drove them from their homes? Drought-ravaged fields, famine in the Aegean highlands, or the collapse of trade networks that once linked Mycenae to Canaan? For decades, historians blamed the Sea Peoples for razing coastal cities. Ugarit burned, Hattusa abandoned, Cyprus eclipsed. Yet recent scholarship suggests a more complex picture. The Sea Peoples may have been as much a symptom of systemic collapse as a cause. Earthquakes weakened palace walls, prolonged droughts dried river valleys, political infighting shattered alliances. Into this vacuum the Sea Peoples moved, sometimes as mercenaries for weakened rulers, sometimes as marauders seeking new lands. Were they conquerors, refugees, or both, men and women driven to the edge by calamity, their tridents tools of survival? Egyptian inscriptions at Medinet Habu immortalize one battle, Ramesses, that repels invaders in a sea of chariot wheels and overturned ships. Reliefs show captives bound in ropes, their foreign coiffures and weapons meticulously carved. Yet there are no sea people inscriptions of their own, no monuments daubed with victory chants. Their story survives only in the records of the civilizations they confronted. How did they record their losses and triumphs? Were songs sung in unfamiliar tongues as they disembarked on hostile shores? Archaeologists dig through destruction layers along the Levantine corridor. In Ugarit, they find charred beams and collapsed roofs, dating to c. 1190 BCE. In the Hittite capital, they uncover hastily buried pottery mixed with foreign arrowheads. Each burned hearth and broken jug tells of nights spent in panic, of civilian flight and military desperation. Yet in some cities, Ashkelon and Dor, material culture reveals post-collapse continuity. Imported Mycenaean pottery gives way to new ceramic styles, suggesting some sea peoples settled and adapted rather than simply vanished. Against this backdrop, tantalizing fringe theories surface. Some propose that refugees from the ruined city of Troy joined the sea peoples, their diaspora spilling westward in search of sanctuary. Others trace links to Sardinian or Sicilian groups, noting similarities in ship construction and sword design. While mainstream archaeology demands hard proof, the very persistence of these theories underscores our fascination with lost lines of descent. Could the sea people's legacy live on in unexpected pockets of medieval Europe, hidden in folk ballads or in the genetic code of coastal communities? Of the sea people's confederations, few vanished entirely. The Peliset are widely believed to have become the Philistines of Canaan, settling in Gaza, Ashdod, and Ekron. Their distinctive pottery, bichrome wares painted with geometric patterns, marks a cultural fusion of Aegean, Levantine, and local traditions. In Anatolia, remnants of the Luca and Shekelesh may have merged with Phrygian and Luwian populations. Surviving communities wove themselves into the fabric of new states, their martial vigor repurposed in the armies of Neo-Hittite kingdoms and later Assyrian campaigns. What visions drove these sea-born wanderers into battle? Hopes of fertile lands, memories of burned villages, or the promise of gold in distant ports? Did they believe in divine favor, carrying idols atop their prow decks? And when truce was offered, did they accept alliances as readily as they once drew swords? Their ashes mingle with those of the cities they felled, yet through archaeological patience we piece together their story, one of upheaval, adaptation, and enduring mystery. Though credited with collapse, the sea peoples also herald transition. Their movements disrupted old trade routes and catalyzed cultural exchange. The Iron Age followed in their wake as smelted weapons replaced bronze, and new scripts supplanted Linear B and hieroglyphic Luwian. In many ways, humanity's trajectory pivoted on their voyages, whether forced by disaster or driven by ambition. Now, as these tales of maritime tumult fade into the foam of legend, our voyage turns south to a land of hidden aquifers and carved tunnels beneath the Sahara's sands. There, in the heart of a seemingly lifeless expanse, the Garamantes crafted an oasis kingdom that thrived against all odds. Our next chapter leads us into the silent irrigation galleries and forgotten palaces of the Garamantes. The dawn sun hovers just above the horizon, casting the Sahara's golden dunes in a soft, molten glow. The wind is already rising, carrying grains of sand that sting like embers on the skin. In this vast emptiness, where life seems impossible, the ruins of Garama emerge like mirages, stone foundations half buried, collapsed fortifications, and, most astonishingly, entrances to tunnels winding silently beneath the sands. Welcome to the realm of the Garamantes, masters of invisible rivers. Imagine stepping into a narrow stone gallery, the air cool and still despite the desert heat above. This is a foggara, a hand-dug aqueduct sloping gently from fossil aquifers deep beneath the Sahara's crust to the surface oases that once sustained tens of thousands, row upon row of intake shafts, circular wells carved with precision, pierced the sand, each one an invitation to uncover life where none should exist. How did desert nomads without iron tools or draft animals conceive and build a network of tunnels stretching for kilometers? What dreams whispered beneath the sand as each shaft was lowered into the earth? Above ground, the foggaras fed palm groves and fields of barley and wheat. Date palms planted in neat orchards cast long, sheltering shadows over villages of stone and mud brick. At noon, schoolchildren would chase goats along shaded lanes, elders would trade ceramic jugs of milk and honey in marketplace stalls, and merchants from across North Africa and the Mediterranean would barter salt, slaves, and gold against Garamantian bronze vessels and ostrich feathers. The air echoed with the click of camels' hooves on packed earth and the laughter of families gathered beneath swaying palms. In a land where most saw only endless dunes, the Garamantes carved havens of green and gold. But they did not stop at agriculture. At the heart of their cities rose towering obelisks, single pieces of basalt carved with false windows and reliefs erected as cenotaphs to royal ancestors. Around these, stelae lay subterranean tombs, vaulted chambers lit by oil lamps, their walls decorated with geometric frescoes that danced in the flickering glow. Chiseled inscriptions in an extinct Libyan script, still only partially understood, named kings, recorded victories, and invoked deities of sky and water. What songs echoed in those silent halls as mourners paid final respects? What sacred rites sealed the bond between the living and the stone guardians of their lineage? Yet the Garamantes were more than farmers and builders. They were warriors whose chariots thundered across the desert. Roman texts spoke of swift raids from the sand, where leather-clad riders struck caravan trains and melted back into shifting dunes before legions could respond. Their horses, bred for endurance, were prized as mounts for Numidian cavalry, and their bronze weapons, forged in furnace fires fed by date palm charcoal, glinted with deadly precision under the desert sun. Did they see themselves as protectors of hidden realms, or as predators claiming what the world refused to share? In the age of Augustus, Rome sought to control North Africa's trade networks, but the Garamantes struck pacts rather than submit outright. Embassy exchanges took place in desert caravans, ambassadors meeting beneath nomadic tents where water skins and ceramic bowls passed from hand to hand. Those who spoke Latin and Greek whispered of Garamantian wealth, ivory-crafted masks, gold jewelry, while Garamantes learned of Mediterranean wines and silks. How many lives were exchanged in those silent treaties, and how did they shape the destiny of empires on either shore? By the 5th century CE, the empire's splendor dimmed. Climate records hint at declining rainfall and a drop in the water table, as centuries of foggara use lowered aquifer levels beyond recovery. When wells ran dry, fields withered, and palm groves fell silent, people drifted away. Roman chroniclers noted ghost towns where once bustling markets stood empty. Without water, the stone monuments crumbled, and even the obelisks toppled in solemn collapse. Was this a gradual retreat or a desperate exodus under the moonless desert sky? Centuries passed, and shifting dunes buried cities whole. It wasn't until the 20th century that aerial photography and exploratory drilling revealed the foggara's hidden traces. Archaeologists now map intake shafts like a constellation of wells, while ground teams clear sand from collapsed corridors and restore fallen stelae. The artifacts they unearth, ornate bronze masks, ostrich eggshell beads, and fragments of painted pottery, are fragments of a story almost lost to time, but still alive in every weathered tunnel and every toppled stone. Standing among these ruins, you feel the weight of unanswered questions. What visions guided the Garamantes as they carved their aqueducts in utter isolation? Did they consider their tunnels vines of stone, reaching out to caress the heart of the desert? What prayers echoed in the vaulted tombs as royalty lay in repose, their journeys to the afterlife charted by water flowing beneath their feet? And when the last well silted over, did they curse the sun or bless the sands that once sheltered their empire? As the Sahara wind scours the obelisks and the sun climbs high over these hidden waterways, we leave the desert's guardians behind. From the silent pipes of Garama, our journey turns northward to the oldest known temple in human history, where stone circles stand like sentinels against time's tide. Next, we seek the builders of Göbekli Tepe, whose monuments challenge our understanding of prehistoric society. The dawn light filters through swirling dust above the ridge of Göbekli Tepe, where ancient stones puncture the sky like the ribs of a colossal, forgotten creature. In this moment, 10,000 years before Egypt's pyramids, before the first grains were sown, you and the earliest builders of civilization stand together, shoulder to shoulder, under a vault of stars that will know their work long after its purpose is forgotten. These were not city dwellers, but hunter-gatherers, following wild herds across Anatolia's high plains. Yet they paused here, on a windswept hilltop, to erect enormous T-shaped pillars, some weighing over 20 tons, quarried from nearby limestone outcrops. Each pillar bears the deep relief of foxes, boars, snakes, vultures, and abstract symbols that twist and curl like living things. Why would people with no pottery, no metal, and no permanent dwellings devote seasons of their nomadic lives to carving and raising monoliths? What invisible force drew them back, year after year, to build enclosures of stone where none had stood before? Split into at least 6 concentric circles, Göbekli Tepe's enclosures span nearly half a hectare. Pillars rise from the bedrock in pairs, their tops linked by stone lintels, forming gateways into shadowed courtyards. In the deepest central pits, archaeologists find pits of animal bone, gazelle, aurochs, wild sheep, laid in careful depositions that hint at feasting rituals. Imagine the crackle of fires, the echo of chanting, and the rhythmic beat of drums as a community of dozens, or perhaps hundreds, gathered beneath a canopy of constellations, their chants filling the night's chill air. Mainstream scholars argue that Göbekli Tepe rewrites our assumptions. Rather than farming emerging first and cities following, complex religion and communal ritual may have preceded agriculture. The effort to quarry, transport, and erect these pillars suggests an unprecedented level of social organization. Did the need to coordinate feast days and cooperative labor at Göbekli Tepe drive groups to maintain semi-permanent camps, inadvertently laying the groundwork for later crop cultivation? If sacred gatherings created the first seeds of settlement, what does that say about our own origins? Then, after centuries of use, centuries in which newer circles were built over older ones, the builders did something even more mysterious. They buried their own temples. Pillars were laid flat, pits filled with rubble and soil, erasing the circles from sight. Was this a ritual closure, a gesture of respect that preserved the sanctity of these places? Or did shifting beliefs demand a fresh start, with new monuments destined to replace the old? The careful burial suggests intent, not abandonment, as though the stones themselves were alive and needed to be laid to rest. Fringe theories propose Göbekli Tepe as a celestial observatory, its pillars aligning with solstices or marking the risings of Orion and Sirius, a proto-scientific chart carved in stone. While precise astronomical correlations remain debated, the placement of certain monoliths along cardinal points and sightlines to distant hills cannot be mere coincidence. Did the builders aim to map the heavens as their ancestors once mapped migration routes? Or were the animal reliefs themselves totems of celestial forces, each creature a guardian of cosmic thresholds? Yet, unlike later civilizations, the people of Göbekli Tepe left no written record. No tablets preserve their chants, no inscriptions explain their rites. We hear them only in echoes, the hammer blow marks on limestone, the scatter of flint tools at excavation edges, the dark stains of hearth fires. Every chipped stone and buried bone is a fragment of a story we aren't privy to. Their myths, their fears, their visions of a world animated by spirits and stars. As we brush away layers of millennia, we glimpse a society that dared the impossible. They moved monoliths without wheels, coordinated labor without bureaucracy, and crafted a shared sacred landscape out of nothing but rock and ritual. Göbekli Tepe stands as both the dawn of monumentality and a testament to human imagination, proof that even before fields were ploughed, our ancestors reached for the divine. What final rites were performed before those circles were buried? Did the builders foresee the coming of agriculture, planting seeds in soil turned sacred by their ceremonies? How many seasons passed as they hammered away at the limestone, their eyes lifted to the same stars that now guide us? And perhaps most hauntingly, if such a great undertaking could vanish so completely, what other marvels have we yet to unearth beneath our feet? As the morning sun warms the smooth surfaces of those ancient pillars, we leave behind Göbekli Tepe's sacred circles and step forward across time and terrain to the wind-swept heights of the Andes. There, on the shores of Lake Titicaca, we will trace the extraordinary legacy of another stone-wrought civilization, the architects of Tiwanaku. You crest a gentle rise and suddenly the world opens into a vast, high-altitude plain, the sky an impossible blue above Lake Titicaca's silken surface. The air is thin and biting, each breath a reminder that you stand nearly 4,000 meters above sea level. At your feet lie the silent stones of Tiwanaku, enormous monoliths and stepped platforms hewn with precision as though they sprouted from the earth itself. Here, on this wind-swept plateau, the puzzle of a civilization built in harmony with sky and soil awaits your discovery. Look closely at the Gateway of the Sun, its single block of andesite over 3 meters high, carved with the stern face of the staff god, and feel the weight of belief etched into hard stone. The deity's wings spread wide, clutching twin staffs that seem to channel cosmic power. Around this centerpiece you'll find megalithic blocks weighing dozens of tons, their edges so finely dressed that a single hair cannot slip between them. Without iron tools or the wheel, how did Tiwanaku's masons achieve such flawless joins? What rituals accompanied the carving of each pillar when ice-cold winds stung exposed arms and frost glazed the granite chisels? Stretching nearly 40 hectares, Tiwanaku's Apana pyramid appears at first glance to be a natural rise in the terrain. But stepped terraces and underground drainage tunnels reveal it as a human masterpiece, an immense platform designed to capture and channel rainwater into subterranean chambers. Nearby, the Kalasasaya temple frames the sky with vertical stones set upon a raised plaza, while avenues of sunken courts lead pilgrims in processional paths. Imagine your footsteps echoing on stone corridors as priests walked before you, their heads bowed in devotion, their voices raised in chants that once resonated under a canopy of stars. Beyond the monumental core, fields ripple outward in a quilt of rectangular raised platforms and water-filled canals, the famed Waru system. At first glance, these beds seem random, but from a height, they form an elegant grid designed to retain moisture, prevent frost, and nourish maize, quinoa, and tubers. Can you sense the patience and planning required to dig each channel by hand, to balance earth and water with such sub-decadal foresight? These fields sustain thousands, proving that in the thin air of the high Andes, ingenuity could coax abundance from scarcity. Unlike contemporaneous empires, Tiwanaku left no written chronicles. No clay tablets preserve the names of kings or the content of sacred hymns. Instead, their story is told in architecture and iconography. Intricate carvings, staff gods, condor heads, interlocking geometric motifs cover temple lintels and portable stone stelae. Each symbol feels like a fragment of a cosmic map, a visual lexicon whose grammar we only half understand. What messages did the staff god relay? What myths were painted on wooden panels now lost to time? Between 500 and 1000 CE, Tiwanaku's influence radiated across the southern Andes. Ceramics decorated with staff god motifs appear hundreds of kilometers away. Textiles and metalwork echo Tiwanaku's distinctive style in distant settlements. Yet by around 1100 CE, the city's plazas lay abandoned. Did a series of highland droughts crack the foundation of its agricultural system? Did political fractures loosen the bonds of communal cooperation? Or did religious upheavals demand new sanctuaries elsewhere? In many places, monuments stand half submerged in grasses, their stones leaning like sentinels resigned to obsolescence. Modern LiDAR surveys have unveiled entire neighborhoods hidden beneath centuries of silt, reanimating blocks long thought lost. Archaeologists now map streets and dwellings with centimeter accuracy, while re-excavated drainage channels flow once more under camp canvas tents. Radiocarbon dates from charred beams and agricultural pollen cores sketch a portrait of resilience and adaptation, of a culture that thrived in conditions most would deem impossible. Imagine the ceremony as the sun reached its zenith and light shafts pierced temple doorways, igniting patterned shadows on stone floors. What invocations did priests utter, their breath visible in pre-dawn chill? When the last pilgrim departed, did they leave offerings at the base of monoliths, a corn husk bundle, a beaded necklace, or did they carry the divine spark to new highland settlements? And when the city finally fell silent, did the gods themselves sleep beneath the rubble, awaiting a proper burial none could provide? Today, as you trace your finger along the smooth surface of a perfectly jointed block or step, gingerly onto a raised field rim, you touch the pulse of a civilization that harmonized rock, ritual, and rain. Tiwanaku reminds us that architectural grandeur need not rise in river valleys or fertile lowlands, that in places where oxygen thins and horizons widen, human ambition can still carve beauty from stone. And as the Andean wind stirs dust across sunken plazas and basalt monoliths, we drift away from the shores of Titicaca toward the cross-continental web of caravan routes, where merchants spoke Sogdian in bustling caravanserais. Our path now leads us to the Sogdians, merchants, diplomats, and storytellers of the Silk Road. Standing at the threshold of Samarkand's ancient walls, you feel the pulse of a civilization built not in palaces of stone, but in the corridors of commerce and the networks of trust woven across continents. The Sogdians, merchants, diplomats, and storytellers of Central Asia crafted an empire of ideas and goods that stretched from the Chinese Tang court to the bazaars of Byzantium. Yet their greatest monuments were not temples or tombs, but the living tapestry of cultures they bridged. Imagine caravans threading the Oxus River Valley, laden with bolts of Chinese silk, gleaming like liquid moonlight, frankincense that perfumed the air, and glass beads imported from distant Tyre. Sogdian camel drivers spoke in a melodic Eastern Iranian tongue, scribbling contracts in Aramaic script on parchment scrolls. Their settlements, Samarkand, Bukhara, Panjakent, were cosmopolitan crossroads where Zoroastrians, Buddhists, Christians, and Manichaeans met in bustling markets. What conversations echoed beneath vaulted caravanserai halls as merchants haggled over price, traded gossip, and swapped stories of emperors and bandits. Unlike empires built by conquest, the Sogdians ruled through reputation. Trusted family networks, clans spanning towns, ensured that a pack of silk arriving in Chang'an would be faithfully exchanged for gold or spices. Their magistrates of the road arbitrated disputes, kept ledgers of credit, and even provided protection against raiders. How did they maintain such cohesion across deserts and mountains, where a single misstep could strand a trader for months? Their answer lay in codes of honor as binding as any royal decree, in oaths sworn over tea and bread, and in gifts of hospitality that turned strangers into lifelong allies. Sogdian influence went beyond commerce. In Dunhuang's cave temples, dancers in mural frescoes wear Sogdian robes, their sleeves long and flowing, their musical instruments, lutes and drums, reflecting Central Asian designs. At Panjakent, archaeologists uncover house shrines where Zoroastrian fire altars stand beside niches for Buddha statues. This syncretism was not imposition, but invitation, a blending of beliefs that spread new philosophies across the Silk Road. What hymns did bardic minstrels compose, weaving Persian legends into Chinese melodies? How did the flicker of a Sogdian torchlight in a Buddhist grotto kindle faith in lands beyond the mountains? When Tang emissaries arrived, Sogdian interpreters smoothed negotiations, their knowledge of protocol and language earning them posts as court advisors and city magistrates. Sogdians served in the Byzantine and Persian palms alike, carrying news of rebellions and harvests, royal marriages and military campaigns. Their parchment letters, some fragments of which survive, mention grain shipments, political intrigues, and pleas for safe passage. Could a caravan's delay alter the course of alliances? Might a single letter delivered by a Sogdian courier avert war or spark intrigue in distant capitals? By the mid-8th century, the Abbasid Revolution and rising native powers reshaped Central Asia. Sogdian autonomy faded as Uyghur Khans and Karakhanid princes took charge of trade routes. Islam's spread transformed religious landscapes, yet Sogdian merchants adapted, their scripts evolving into Old Uyghur and their faith practices melding into new communities. Gradually, the Sogdian language vanished, its last speakers assimilated, but their legacy endured. Silk continued its ceaseless flow, spices still scented the aisles of Baghdad's markets, and cities founded by Sogdians blossomed under new dynasties. Today, fragmentary letters unearthed in Dunhuang's hidden libraries whisper of Sogdian caravans frozen in time. Their names, Munak, Nanai, Pantu, are scrawled on pitch-black scrolls, treasures of Mustadjum and myrrh. Pottery shards etched with Buddhist sutras in Sogdian script emerge from centuries-old refuse pits. Even the colourful wall paintings of Panjakent's aristocratic villas, recently restored, reveal scenes of banquets where Central Asian robes flare against Indian textiles. Each discovery peels back a layer of history, reminding us that Sogdian vitality pulsed not only through material goods, but through the intangible bonds of culture and language. What risks did Sogdian caravaneers face in borderlands patrolled by pirates and bandits? Which prayers were whispered as camels crested desert horizons at dawn? How many times did a Sogdian family feast over a hearth, toasting to safe journeys and prosperous returns? And when their own cities fell under new rulers, did they feel loss at the passing of an era they had built from silk and salt? The Sogdians did not vanquish neighbors with armies, but with trust. They held court in tea-houses and under merchants' tents, building bridges of goodwill across empires. Their story teaches that civilization's true power lies not in conquest, but in connection, threads of relationship stronger than any iron chain. And so, as the Silk Road wind carries the final echoes of Sogdian caravans into the marketplace of memory, our odyssey reaches its end, spanning deserts and mountains, oceans and plains. From the earliest megaliths of Göbekli Tepe to the soaring monoliths of Tiwanaku, we've traced the silent pulses of human ingenuity. May these stories of vanished empires continue to stir our wonder and remind us that beneath every modern city lie the footprints of those who dared to shape the world from stone, water, and spirit. And that wraps up our journey across time and continents, from the hidden aqueducts of the Garamantes to the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe, and onward to the lofty heights of Tiwanaku and the Silk Road's Sogdian merchants. If these stories of vanished empires stirred your curiosity and left you eager for more, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button if you enjoyed exploring these mysteries with us, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Share your thoughts below. What lost civilization should we uncover next? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next adventure into the ancient past.